I exhaled a thick cloud of cigarette smoke, watching it drift across my computer screen. The job portal stared back at me with the same cold response I'd seen all day. Position mismatch. We will not be proceeding at this time. Thank you. I stared at the window, my expression blank despite the growing frustration gnawing at my gut. I was about to click away to the next listing when my phone vibrated on the desk. I glanced at the screen and picked it up. Hello? Xiaosu. The voice was raspy and familiar. A smirk touched my lips, sharp and mocking. Old Lee, don't tell me you miss me already. Is the company falling apart without me? What kind of attitude is that? Old Lee's voice rose, thick with suppressed rage. I sent you to negotiate with a client, and you ended up beating him. Was I supposed to keep you? Manager Wong was just having a little fun after a few drinks. Maybe he got a bit hands-on, but it wasn't harassment. Did you really need to play the hero? How old are you, Su Jing? Do you still think the world rewards good people? He took a sharp breath, his voice dropping to a hiss. I don't think you realize how much power Manager Wong has. He's the kind of man who flies private. I leaned back, blowing a ring of smoke. Private? As long as he doesn't exceed 30,000 million powers, he shouldn't be a problem for security, right? Don't talk nonsense with me. Old Lee choked on his words, coughing. Listen, I managed to get him to agree to a meeting tonight. He specifically demanded that you show up and apologize. If you bow your head, everything can be discussed. I might even give you another chance. You know I've always appreciated your talent. Suddenly, the light bulb above my head flickered violently. I squinted up at the ceiling, wondering if the wiring was going bad. When I looked back at the monitor, a strange pop-up had appeared in the center of the screen. Asterisk system recommendation. Based on our screening, you are a match for the position of Special Risk Management. Would you like to submit your detailed resume immediately? Yes/no asterisk. I assumed it was just more spam. I reached for the mouse to close it, but Old Lee was still droning on in my ear, lecturing me about my future. My hand paused. A cold laugh bubbled up in my throat. Old Lee, I said, my voice dripping with fake sweetness. There are plenty of companies begging to hire me. You think I'm desperate for your job? I clicked yes. I know you've got guts, Su Jing, but don't be stubborn, Old Lee snapped. You've made good money over the years, but you spend it just as fast. I know you're living paycheck to paycheck. You can't afford to lose this job. I took a long drag of my cigarette and went silent for a moment. Fine, I'll cave. Manager Wong is right there with you, isn't he? I'll apologize. But let's be clear, I bow my head, and I'm back in the office tomorrow. Same salary, same benefits. I'll bring him over right now. Old Lee's voice turned eager. I could hear his footsteps and the rustle of clothes. He clearly had me on speakerphone. If you satisfy him, you're back. You two can shake hands. Let bygones be bygones. Maybe I'll even let you handle this account. I waited. After a few seconds, a muffled male voice came through the phone. Hello? Hello? I repeated, my voice calm. I'm your father. I hung up before he could scream and tossed the phone onto the bed. A wave of bitterness washed over me. I'd acted on impulse, played the hero, and got bitten for it. Now I was unemployed. It was a disgusting situation, but I didn't regret it. After years in the rat race, you learn that everything has a price, even doing the right thing. At least I could still look at myself in the mirror. Besides, with my skills, I wouldn't stay unemployed for long. I started scrolling through more job listings, but a sudden knock at my door stopped me. 2 sharp raps, then silence. Who is it? I called out. No answer. I stood up, walked to the door, and pulled it open. No one was there. I looked down and saw a package sitting on the floor. I picked it up and headed back inside, frowning. I hadn't ordered anything. It was nearly 8 o'clock. Who delivers this late? The address and name were definitely mine, though. I figured it was just some cheap household item I'd impulse bought for a cent on a shopping app. I grabbed a pair of scissors and sliced the tape. Inside, the first thing I saw was an A4 sheet of paper covered in fine print. I tossed the paper aside, revealing a sleek, black briefcase and a transparent mask. I was baffled. I'd seen plenty of briefcases in my time, but this one looked expensive, minimalist, high quality, and strangely heavy. Who would send me this? And what was with the mask? I reached into the box to lift the briefcase. As my hand brushed the edge, I felt the icy touch of metal. It felt like a handle. When I pulled the object out, My eyebrows shot up. It was a handgun. It was a bright, polished silver, elegant and dangerously heavy in my palm. Wow, I thought, a nervous laugh escaping me. They're even sending high-end lighters with briefcases now? Without thinking, I aimed at the ceiling and pulled the trigger. Bang! A deafening roar filled the room. A flash of orange fire spat from the barrel. A bullet tore through the air and vanished into the ceiling. A thin trail of blue smoke curled upward from the muzzle. I ducked instinctively, my brain going completely white. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. That wasn't a lighter. That was a real gun. I turned my head mechanically, staring at the silver weapon in my hand. My breath came in ragged gasps. I scrambled toward the window, yanking the curtains shut, and shoved the gun under my mattress. I backed away, my hands shaking. Confusion and terror surged through me. Was this a mistake? Some mob hitman sent it to the wrong address. No, the name on the package was mine. Was I being framed? My eyes snapped back to the discarded piece of paper on the desk. I lunged for it, grabbing the sheet I'd dismissed as junk mail. As I read the lines, a literal chill ran down my spine. Asterisk congratulations. Your resume has been received and approved. Asterisk. Basic office supplies have been issued. Internship assessment is about to begin. In 2 hours, you will be transported to the Soldier King's world. Asterisk, please immediately contact and protect the client to ensure their safety during the early stages of the apocalypse. Once the client has gained independent survival capabilities, the mission ends, and the company will recall you. Asterisk. During the mission, the company will provide necessary basic assistance, including but not limited to language translation, currency exchange, and identity setup. Asterisk, do not disclose any information about the company to outsiders. Success results in official employment and expanded permissions. Failure results in being left to fend for yourself. Asterisk. As I reached the end, a line of red fire ignited at the top of the paper. There was no flame, no smoke, and no heat. The paper simply began to vanish, dissolving from the top down as if being eaten by an invisible force. Not even ash remained. I let go, watching the paper flutter toward the floor as the fire consumed the final line of text at the bottom. Tiandao Infinite Liability Company. This was either a meticulously planned prank or something far more sinister. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the bizarre package and that disappearing paper. Maybe it was some kind of high-tech magic paper that dissolved upon contact with skin oils. But who would send a real gun as a joke? Could it be my client, Old Wong? No way. That scumbag had just demanded I call him to apologize. My scalp began to tingle. Images from movies flashed through my head. Stories of bored billionaires playing sick games with the lives of ordinary people. Maybe a team was about to burst through my door, kidnap me, and drop me in the wilderness for some twisted survival show. Crap, I muttered under my breath. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. The ringing tone felt like it lasted forever. My lips were dry, and my heart hammered against my ribs as I rehearsed what to say. Finally, the call connected. Hello? I need to report. The female operator's voice cut off mid-sentence. In its place, a mechanical, ice-cold voice echoed directly inside my head. Asterisk, do not disclose company information in any form. Second-time offenders will be severely punished. Please put on the mask immediately. Prepare quickly. Asterisk. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my pupils dilated with fear. This was getting weirder by the second. I could explain a dropped call with technology, but that mechanical voice hadn't come from the speaker. It sounded like it originated from inside my own brain. My old phone didn't even have stereo sound, let alone the ability to project a voice into my skull. Was I dreaming? Or was this actually happening? I stumbled back and sank into my desk chair. My eyes caught something on the computer screen. In the corner of a job recruitment page, the words, Tiandao Infinite Liability Company, stared back at me. I lunged for the mouse, but as soon as the cursor hovered over the name, the entire page vanished. I frantically searched for the company name online. Nothing. It was as if it had never existed. I buried my face in my hands, my fingers gripping my hair. Could I run? No. If some shadowy organization was already watching me, running might just make things worse. I looked at the transparent mask sitting on my desk. It looked like cheap plastic. The voice had told me to put it on. I hesitated for several minutes, inspecting every inch of it, before finally pressing it against my face. The moment it touched my skin, a freezing sensation washed over me. The mask didn't just sit there, it vanished. I touched my face, but all I felt was my own skin. Then, a row of glowing numbers appeared in my field of vision, ticking down. 1 hour, 32 minutes, 10 seconds. I sat frozen for 10 seconds, my chest heaving in the quiet room. The only sounds were my racing heart and the hum of the computer fan. I scrambled to the bathroom and clawed at my jawline, trying to find the edge of the invisible mask. I rubbed until my face was bright red, but there was nothing there. In the mirror, I looked the same, except for the countdown timer hovering in the air and my twitching eyelid. This wasn't a game for rich people. This was a nightmare. I turned on the tap and splashed freezing water on my face. I had to stay calm. Something alien was inside my body now, and since I couldn't get it out, I had to move on. If the mask was supernatural, the gun and the briefcase had to be, too. I checked the timer. 59 minutes, 22 seconds. I sat on my bed with the gear laid out in front of me. I couldn't find any information about this specific handgun online. The magazine wouldn't come out. I even fired a test shot into a pillow. No shell casing, no bullet hole, just a strange discharge. The briefcase was even weirder. When I touched the bottom, I felt a strange connection to it. It contained a cubic meter of invisible storage space. I experimented by putting a few items inside and taking them out. It was like a treasure from a fantasy novel, though it wouldn't fit anything too large. Under different circumstances, I would have been ecstatic. Now, I was just terrified. The more magical the items, the more dangerous the Soldier King's world was likely to be. Apocalypse. Survival. These words weighed on me like lead. I didn't have much time left. I had to prepare. I spent the next half hour frantically ordering supplies through delivery apps. Soon, my tiny apartment was overflowing with gear. I thought about running one last time, but that timer followed my gaze everywhere I looked. I was caught in something supernatural. My best bet was to follow the instructions and hope for the best. 31 minutes, 09 seconds. I organized the supplies and sat back at my desk, breathing hard. I took out a life insurance policy and named my parents as beneficiaries. Then, I maxed out every loan app one could find, totaling about 170,000 yuan. I transferred 150,000 to my parents as a gift to protect the money from being clawed back by the banks if I disappeared. I sent another 10,000 to my landlord to cover 6 months of rent and left a note saying I'd be away for a while. The rest I kept as cash. Finally, I cleared my browsing history and called home. Son, my mother's voice came through, sounding sleepy. Why are you calling so late? I just transferred some money to you and Dad. Check if it arrived. Money? 150,000? Where did you get this? She sounded wide awake now. I could hear my father murmuring in the background. I forced a cheerful tone, though my voice trembled. Good news. A rival company headhunted me. My boss gave me a huge bonus just to try and make me stay. I don't need it right now, so you and Dad should take it. Spend it on whatever you want. Really? Oh, my son is so successful. You scared me for a second. I thought you'd done something illegal. Her voice was full of pride. I swallowed hard, tears stinging my eyes. No, Mom. Everything is fine. When did your son ever get involved in anything illegal? I said, forcing a laugh into the phone. Mr. Lee just transferred the money. I was so excited I forgot you two were sleeping. Anyway, I've got a massive project at work. I'll be working overtime for the next few months, so don't call me unless it's an emergency. I'll reach out when I can. My father's voice rumbled in the background. Overtime is fine if the pay is good, but don't kill yourself for them. Don't let a little money go to your head. You aren't selling your soul to the company. The harder you work, the more they'll use you. Just do enough to look good to your boss. I know, Dad, I whispered. Go back to sleep. I have to get to the office early tomorrow. I hung up. The silence of the apartment rushed back in. I let out a long, heavy sigh. I had done everything I could. If the worst happened to me, at least my parents were taken care of. I looked down at my vision. 12 seconds, 11 seconds, 10 seconds. The final countdown. I stared at the numbers, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached into my trench coat and gripped the handle of the gun. 3, 2, 1, 0. Time hit 0. My pupils shrank as a blinding speck of light appeared in the center of the room. It expanded instantly, stretching into a towering, golden portal. It stood there, shimmering and silent. My mind raced. Was this aliens? Gods? As long as I didn't step in, maybe nothing would happen. I thought about reaching out with my phone to record what was inside. But before I could move, the portal lunged. It flew toward me, swallowing me whole. Far away, in a different room, Fu Qingdai bolted upright in bed with a scream. Her white silk pajamas were soaked through with cold sweat. Another nightmare. She sat there trembling, tears blurring her vision. The dreams had been coming for 2 weeks now. They were always the same. Freezing rain, hunger, madness, and a world turned into a literal hell. The smell of blood and rotting meat was so vivid she could still taste it. She stood up and pulled back the curtains. The sun was just beginning to rise. The clouds outside were strange, layered like ocean waves, rolling across the sky in perfect, rhythmic patterns. Anyone else would have called it a beautiful sunrise. To Qingdai, it was a death sentence. The tears fell faster. Her dreams always started with peaceful scenes that slowly transitioned into the apocalypse. Since the third dream, she had noticed the weather in reality perfectly matched the weather in her nightmares. These clouds were the final sign. The day of the catastrophe was close. She had tried to tell her parents. She had tried to warn people. But she was just a student. Nobody believed a girl having bad dreams. The door creaked open. Her mother, Zhang Wan, walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at her daughter with exhausted frustration. Qingdai threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing. Another dream? Zhang Wan sighed. Mom, I'm serious. The world is ending. The clouds today are exactly like the ones in the dream. Everything is matching up. Please, just believe me once. We have to prepare. We have to move somewhere remote. Zhang Wan pulled away, her face hardening. Qingdai, you're just stressed about your exams. They're only a month away. I've already talked to the doctor. Stop thinking about these fantasies and focus on your studies. If you focus, the pressure will go away. Do your homework at school, go to bed early, and you'll feel better in a few days. Qingdai felt like she was breaking apart. Will you just listen to me? Fine, fine, Zhang Wan said dismissively. Finish your story, then eat breakfast and get to school. Qingdai tried to explain the details, her voice shaking. She described the man she saw in the vision, the voice she heard. But her mother wasn't listening. She was looking at her watch, her mind already on the day's chores. Mom, are you even hearing me? I'm hearing you. It's the same thing you said yesterday, Zhang Wan muttered. She stood up to leave. Qingdai grabbed her mother's hand, desperate. Mom, can I have some money? I give you an allowance every week. I need more. I want to buy extra study materials and eat better at school. How much? 500 yuan. Zhang Wan's eyes flared with anger. 500? She probably wanted to waste it on snacks. Absolutely not. I'll give you 50. Now get dressed for school. She slammed the door, leaving Qingdai alone in the silence. The girl sat at her desk, tears dripping onto her notebooks. She felt invisible. If only she were older, maybe she would have the money to save them herself. Outside the room, she could hear the TV blaring and her mother yelling at her father. Old Fu, why are you just sitting there? Call her teacher and ask if she's seeing a boy. She's acting crazy. Later that morning, Qingdai sat in her classroom, a ghost among the living. The sound of students reciting text echoed around her, but her mind was trapped in the nightmare. Her seatmate, Xiaoning, leaned over. Qingdai? The dreams again. Qingdai nodded solemnly. Xiaoning, listen to me. It's coming. When the rain starts, do not let it touch your skin. The water is tainted. Stock up on food. Seal your windows. Xiaoning nodded slowly, her expression full of pity. As she turned back to her book, she let out a quiet, hidden sigh. She thought her friend had finally lost her mind. Her mother had already called, asking Xiaoning to keep an eye on her mentally unstable daughter. It seemed my condition was getting worse in everyone's eyes. Xiaoning just shook her head, pulled out a romance novel, and started reading intently. The student in the seat in front of us turned around, glanced at her desk, and whispered, Hey, why are you still reading that? Look at what happened to Qingdai. She read so much she went crazy. You better be careful. The school is cracking down on stuff like this lately. Xiaoning didn't even look up. This is a romance novel. Even if I go crazy, I'll just be looking for a man. Go back to your studying. Fine, but lend it to me when you're done, he whispered back. Noon arrived quickly. A sea of students flooded toward the cafeteria, and I was right there in the middle of the crowd. My eyes darted from face to face, searching. Finally, I spotted him. I jogged forward and grabbed the edge of his sleeve. Gao Peng froze. He turned around and saw me standing there, looking awkward. When he saw my face, he got visibly nervous. I knew my reputation. I was the school beauty, the girl most guys were too intimidated to talk to. Lately, people said I'd lost my mind, so the attention had died down a bit, but there were still plenty of boys who snuck around just to get a glimpse of me. Is something wrong? Gao Peng asked, his voice trembling. I bit my lip and stared at the tips of my shoes. Gao Peng, can I borrow some money? I'll definitely pay you back next month. He looked surprised. How much do you need? I only have 100 yuan on me. He was clearly conflicted. He didn't have much, but when the school beauty asks for a favor, it's hard to say no. That's enough. Thank you, I said, looking up with a bright smile. Gao Peng's heart skipped a beat. He was already spiraling into a fantasy. I had smiled at him. I had touched his sleeve. He figured that borrowing and returning money meant we'd have to meet at least twice more. He handed over the 100 yuan immediately. Not far away, a pair of small eyes watched me closely. A girl was already on her phone. Auntie Zhang. Yeah, it's me. Qingdai is talking to a boy in my class right now. No, I don't think they're dating, but her behavior is getting really strange. You should probably take her to see a doctor soon. I stared at the massive sign in front of me and felt my stomach drop. You've got to be kidding me. Where the hell am I? The sign read, Longshan Mental Hospital. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed behind me. I spun around like a startled bird. A blue and white electric trolley car was rattling down the asphalt road, its long poles sparking against the overhead wires. A few old-fashioned cars followed behind it. The shops lining the street had wooden window frames painted in bright colors, with glass display cases visible inside. Everything looked like it was from decades ago. At the corner, an old man was tending to a popcorn machine. That loud bang had just been the pressure release from his furnace. The sun was scorching, and the air smelled like a mix of fresh popcorn, diesel, and hot asphalt. My heart hammered against my ribs. The scene was bizarre yet hauntingly familiar. The sun looked slightly too red. The people looked normal, just dressed in somewhat dated clothing. My modern trench coat felt completely out of place in this heat. I noticed people staring, so I quickly ripped it off and draped it over my arm to hide my briefcase. I looked back at the hospital. I had actually traveled to another world. 1 second, I was in my cramped rental apartment, and the next, I was standing on a busy street in broad daylight. This wasn't the world I knew. The mysterious company wasn't lying. But they mentioned a dying world and an apocalypse. Looking around, everything seemed peaceful. There were no sirens, no soldiers, and no panic. I wiped the sweat from my face and forced myself to breathe. I couldn't go back now. I had to find the client. Thanks to the mask the company gave me, I had a HUD in my vision. A red dot was flashing right inside the mental hospital. I saw a security booth at the gate, the guard watching me suspiciously. I looked away, walked past the gate, and ducked into the shadows of some trees around the corner. I checked my pockets and the briefcase. I found a stack of cash and an ID card. The money said Longshan Huitong Bank, and the ID was formatted vertically. The company had thought of everything, even translating the signs on the street into characters I could read. Heavenly Dao Responsibility Limited. I muttered. The name made no sense. I needed to talk to this client. I just hoped they were a doctor or a nurse and not one of the patients. I tucked my gun and the cash into my bag, put my coat back on, and approached the perimeter wall. It was low, barely 2 meters. I hopped over, landed in the yard, and ran toward the main building. I slipped through the doors, trying to look natural. The nurses and patients were speaking a language I understood perfectly. I saw a sign for the restroom and ducked inside to hide for a moment. Inside the hospital's multipurpose hall, I, Qingdai, sat by the window in my patient gown. The view outside was beautiful, with green trees and bright sunlight, but I couldn't enjoy it. The rhythmic creaking of the ceiling fan and the screams of the other patients kept me on edge. My eyes welled up with tears. Time was running out. I had tried so hard to warn them, but in the end, they just locked me away. Nobody believed me. Was there really no way out? Wait. The voice in my dream. It told me a man would come for me. If he showed up, there was still a chance. If he didn't, well, maybe that meant the dream was just a dream and the world wasn't ending after all. I wiped my eyes, trying to stay positive. I stood up, tired of looking at the trees, and turned to head back to my room. That's when I saw him. In the dim light of the hallway, a silhouette appeared. He was wearing a long coat and carrying a leather briefcase. My breath hitched. It was the exact same figure from my vision, the man standing amidst a mountain of corpses under a dark sky, a gun in one hand and a bag in the other. He was here. I didn't care about my looks right now. Before I entered this building, I had been praying for a client who was strong and capable. Even if they were mentally ill, I just wanted someone who could help me survive. But reality was a cruel joke. A mental patient, a student, and a beautiful girl. Every single one of those was a liability. I reached the lobby and scanned the room. I grabbed a chair and sat down directly across from Qingdai. The moment we were face to face, the red dot on her forehead vanished. We sat in silence for a moment. I studied her. She kept her head down, her small hands twisted together in her lap. The company contacted you in advance, didn't they? I asked, testing the waters. Qingdai's hands were sweating. I could tell her heart was racing. To her, I was a figure from a dream appearing in the flesh, a harbinger of the end of the world. What's your name? She whispered, still not looking up. Qingdai, she replied softly. Brother, I don't know what to call you. I hesitated. She didn't seem like she belonged in a mental ward. I wanted to tell her my real name, Su Jing, but the company's damn rules were strict about secrecy. I didn't know where the line was, and I couldn't risk a client running their mouth. I needed her trust, but I also needed a cover. I sat up straight, my expression serious. What we discuss stays between us. You can't tell anyone who I am. Do you understand? Qingdai nodded vigorously, her eyes filled with intensity. I'm the director and elite operative of the company's Special Operations Department. I lied smoothly. My name is Li Haoqing. You can call me Director or Brother Hao. From now on, in front of others, we're cousins. Got it. I understand, cousin, she said. I pulled a notebook and pen from my bag. Now that you know who I am, I need you to be honest. No hiding anything. Tell me about your life, your family, what the company told you, and why exactly you're in a mental hospital. I'm not crazy, she said firmly, gripping her knees. I was sent here by mistake. I'm a student at Longshan Middle School. I live with my parents. I nodded as I took notes. The fact that she wasn't actually mentally ill was great news. From what she described, this world was almost identical to Earth, just less developed, maybe like the era I grew up in. I could adapt to this easily. Then she started talking about her dreams. My pen stopped mid-sentence. You mean the rain is the problem? I asked, my voice tight. She explained it clearly. 5 days of heavy rain, people going insane, and then the cannibalism. The world falling into chaos. My jaw went stiff. I had barely accepted the fact that I'd traveled to another world, and now I was facing a zombie apocalypse. But the infection method was the worst part. Rain. If the water was contaminated, survival became nearly impossible. Water is life. If you can't touch the water, you're dead. Cousin, are you okay? Qingdai asked softly. I forced a smile, pushing down the panic. I'm fine. Keep going. When did the company contact you? It was just a few days ago, she said. A voice appeared in my dream. It called itself the Tiandao Company. It asked if I wanted to live. I said yes, and it said the contract was signed. It told me someone would come to help me. That's all. I cursed the company silently. What a bunch of thugs. Who says no to living? They trap you with a simple question and then ship you off to a death zone. But something felt off. She knew I was coming days ago, but I was only hired a few hours ago. Was it a time dilation issue? Or could the company see the future? I shook the thoughts away. I couldn't solve that now. We'll keep going. I'll ask, you answer. Okay, she whispered. The rain. How many days until it starts? Do you remember exactly? 7 days from today, she said confidently. I remember that clearly. 7 days. I had 1 week to get her out of here, find a place to hide, and gear up. Can you get home? I asked. I don't care if you have to act or beg. I don't know, she sighed. I want to go home, but my mom insists I stay here for treatment. She visits every day because she's worried. We'll skip that for now, I said. Are there apartments for rent near your house? The closer the better. Her eyes lit up. Yes, there are several rooms for rent in my building. The phone numbers are posted right on the windows. I kept writing. I asked about her family's income, the local laws, and how society worked here. It was a world governed by relationships and favors more than strict law. That was good. It meant I could maneuver. Do you think you're pretty? I asked suddenly. Of course, she blinked, confused. Do I look handsome? How's my outfit? You look great, she said, looking me over. But you look really hot in that coat. I ignored the comment about the heat and fired off a string of rapid-fire questions. Where were the markets? The internet cafes? What was the chemical formula for water? Did she use feminine hygiene products? Qingdai's face turned bright red at the last one, but she answered. I closed my notebook and thought. 7 days. A week of rain. A zombie-like outbreak. The government would likely collapse quickly once the rain started. The water was chemically the same as Earth's, which was good, but the contamination meant outdoor survival was a death sentence. I didn't have time to build a bunker, and I couldn't just kidnap her. However, I had 7,000 yuan in my bag. In a world where a family lived on 2,000 a month, that money was power. I had a week to turn that cash into a fortress. 7,000 yuan was just enough to rent an apartment and stockpile basic supplies. My best bet was to find a place near Fu Qingdai's house. I'd spent enough time talking to her to realize this world wasn't much different from Earth in terms of culture and common sense. I could blend in easily. For the next 7 days, I had to stay under the radar. No breaking laws, no picking fights, no attracting attention. The rest, I'd have to figure out once I got her out of here. As I was planning, a sudden thought hit me. I grabbed my notebook and wrote a single word in English. Hello. I turned the paper toward Fu Qingdai. What did I write? She stared at the paper, her eyes blank. What is that? I really don't recognize those symbols. I felt a headache coming on. My mask, or perhaps the company's technology, translated everything I heard and said perfectly. I could understand their language, and they could understand mine. But the written word was a different story. Whatever I wrote appeared as my own language, which was complete gibberish to the people of this world. This was a major problem. I needed to sign a rental contract to get a place, and I couldn't even write my own name in a way they could read. I tore off another sheet of paper and handed her the pen. Write 2 words for me, I said. Su Jing. Write them heavy, 1 stroke at a time. She looked confused, but did as she was told. When she finished, I took the paper and ran my fingers over the back, feeling the indentations of the ink. It was frustrating. My eyes saw the characters as I knew them, but my touch told me the strokes were completely different from the way I would have written them. The translation service had a massive bug. I was forced to memorize the tactile feel of my own name just to function. I tucked the paper away and looked at her. That's all the questions I have for now. Is there anything you want to say? She nodded nervously, finally gathering the courage to ask the question burning in her mind. Cousin, are you an alien? Without a doubt, I replied, keeping my face perfectly stone cold. I'm a Namekian. Are you wearing human skin? She whispered, her voice trembling. This is just what we Namekians look like, I lied. She seemed to settle a bit at my confirmation, but her mind was still racing. Finally, she asked the big one. What is actually happening with my dreams? I had to make this quick and convincing. The universe is full of civilizations. I began, inventing a story on the fly. Higher authorities have observed that your world has been targeted by a group of space pirates. They're called the Trisolarans. They're monsters. They slaughter every living thing on a planet, turn them into fertilizer, and then strip the resources. They've already seeded your atmosphere with a virus. In a few decades, they'll come back to harvest what's left. Fu Qingdai's face went white. Then why me? You should have told the leaders, the important people. Why did this come to me? She started to break down again, tears streaming down her face. She was just a regular girl. The weight of the world was crushing her. I felt a pang of guilt. I was a grown man, fit and capable, and even I was terrified. Stop crying, Qingdai, I said softly. There's a reason the company chose you. Your body is special. You have antibodies against the virus. If you stay alive, we can develop a cure. She reached out her arm, desperate. I'll do whatever you need. But should we call the police? You can use your spaceship to contact them. They'll believe you. I can't, I said. My ship was shot down by the Trisolarans when I arrived. It crashed somewhere, and my teammates are all dead. I'm the only one left. The disaster is coming, and all we can do is take it one step at a time. Your only job is to stay alive. If you die, everyone dies. The pressure hit her like a mountain. She looked stunned, her expression frozen. I tried to soften the blow. Adjust your mindset. It hasn't happened yet. We can prepare. It might not be as bad as you think. Surprisingly, she pulled herself together. She had a certain resilience. Cousin, she croaked, I still don't understand. Why are you helping us? It's simple, I said, leaning into the role. Where there is evil, there is good. To prevent the world from being destroyed, to protect the peace of the universe, and to uphold love and justice, we travel the stars. Besides, the Trisolarans attacked Namek a few times. We don't sit by and watch. We love peace, but we destroy anyone who threatens us. I sounded like a hero, but inside, I was sweating. I was talking nonsense just to keep her from snapping. You don't sound very peaceful, she muttered, wiping her eyes. We Namekians hate arguing. I countered. I won't ask again. I'm sorry, she squeaked. Just as I was about to continue, a cold voice came from behind me. Hey you, the Namekian. I froze. Fu Qingdai stopped crying. I turned around to see a young nurse, maybe 24, looking at me with a very unfriendly expression. I gave Qingdai a quick look and stood up to face her. Follow me, the nurse said, walking toward an open balcony. I took a deep breath. This was it, my first real test of social integration. I followed her, trying to look composed. Are you Fu Qingdai's relative? She asked, turning to face me. I'm her cousin, I said firmly. Her mother was here this morning. Did you register at the front? Of course. Is there a problem? Not with the registration, she said, her tone sharpening. But that girl is suffering from severe delusions, and here you are feeding her more nonsense. It's bad for her treatment. You can visit, but I won't have you interfering with her recovery. Nurse, I think there's a misunderstanding, I said, shifting gears. My name is Li Haoqing. I grew up with Qingdai. We were very close. We used to play role-playing games all the time when she was little. I was just trying to reconnect with her through something familiar. I paused for effect. I just got back from living abroad. I wanted to surprise her at school, but her classmates told me she'd been hospitalized. She seems clear-headed to me, just emotional. How is she really doing? Is she adjusting? The nurse's expression softened slightly at the mention of me being from abroad. It's not good. She has constant delusions about the end of the world. She tries to warn everyone she meets. But, to be honest, she is strange. Strange how? I asked. She doesn't act like a typical patient. In every other way, she's completely normal. But the things she says are so vivid, so detailed. It's like she's actually seen the end of the world. I let out a bitter laugh and rubbed my forehead. I heard from her classmates that her grades were slipping. Her mom probably pushed her too hard. The pressure finally just snapped her mind. I looked at Nurse Ding. She seemed to be searching for a way to justify keeping the girl here. Nurse Ding, I have a personal favor to ask, I said, my voice dropping to a confidential tone. I don't want her staying here anymore. She looked at me, puzzled. Qingdai doesn't want to be here? You know this environment, I said, gesturing to the sterile, depressing hallway. The pressure will only make her worse. She's missing school, and her father is a doting man. He wouldn't want her in a place like this. The main issue is her mother. I need you to help me. When her mother comes by, I need you to put in a good word. Tell her Qingdai should go home. Nurse Ding straightened her posture, regaining her professional coldness. We have regulations. Unless the parents insist on taking her back, we don't interfere. I understand. That's why it's just a request. I smiled and pulled out my phone. How about this? Let's exchange numbers. I pulled out my Xiaomi 6. The 1080p screen lit up with a crisp, high-definition glow. In this era, it looked like a piece of alien technology. Nurse Ding's professional mask crumbled instantly. Her eyes widened, fixed on the device. What is that? She whispered. Just a phone, I said with a casual shrug. I forgot, this model isn't circulating in the domestic market yet. It's a bit different from what you see in the shops. I pressed the phone into her hand. She held it like it was made of thin glass. I reached out, gently guiding her finger to slide across the screen. I started throwing out tech jargon. Performance beast, thinner than a coin, smoother with use. It's amazing, she breathed. Her face was flushed with excitement. She didn't even notice that I was now fully holding her hand as I showed her the interface. Is this what foreign phones look like now? What language is this? It's Wakandan. I lied smoothly, finally taking the phone back. She pulled her hand away, her cheeks turning a deep shade of pink. Wakanda? I've never heard of that country, she muttered. What company makes this? It's a small country, but the company is famous. It's called Jumi. I flashed her a grin. It takes great photos, too. Want me to take one of you? She looked stunned. Really? I backed up 2 steps, framed the shot, and snapped a picture. I didn't let her see it yet. I opened the editing software and spent 10 seconds aggressively applying beauty filters. I smoothed her skin, brightened the exposure, and narrowed her jawline. Then, I handed it back. Is this me? She gasped. Sorry, I said, acting slightly embarrassed. It's just a phone camera. It can't compare to a professional setup. It usually turns a 10 out of 10 beauty into an 8. The blush on her face reached her ears. The cold nurse was gone. She was beaming. No, this is wonderful. Where can I buy one? It's not on the market yet. I got it through internal connections. Even when it launches, it'll be a limited release. How much does it cost? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Not much. Only 20,000 yuan, I said, lying through my teeth. She nearly choked. 20,000? She quickly tried to recover her composure. Well, for a phone this good, 20,000 is reasonable. I could see her mind racing. She was looking at me differently now. She saw a young, wealthy man with mysterious international connections. Nurse Ding, I said, snapping her back to reality. We've gotten off track. Right. About Qing Dai, she said, nodding vigorously. I can't stand seeing her like this, I said, looking toward the girl's room. This place isn't helping her. She needs a familiar environment. Don't you think? Actually, you might be right, she admitted, her hesitation fading. I'll arrange for home care, I promised. We can still get the medicine and guidance she needs. Plus, I'll have you to consult, right? Can I get your number? She reached into her pocket, likely feeling her old, clunky pager, and looked embarrassed. Instead of pulling it out, she just recited a number. I pretended to type it into my phone, then frowned. Oh, I forgot. I just got back, and this international SIM isn't working for domestic calls yet. Here, write it down for me. I tore a page from my notebook and handed her a pen. Once I had the number, I tucked it away. I'll count on you then. Did I say I'd help? She asked, crossing her arms with a playful, flirtatious smile. I hope you will. You seem like a kind, responsible person. I'd love to take you to dinner to discuss Qing Dai's progress sometime. I lowered my voice. One more thing. If her father comes tomorrow, don't tell him I was here. I want to surprise the family with my return. I can do that, she promised. A voice called from down the hall. She looked back, then turned to me, looking conflicted. I have to get back to work. Wait, I called out, holding up the phone. I still have your photo. Can I keep it? I'll have it printed and bring it to you. She beamed at me, her face glowing. Yes, absolutely. Call me. She turned and practically skipped away. As soon as she was out of sight, my smile vanished. I pulled the piece of paper with her number on it out of my pocket, crumpled it into a ball, and flicked it into a nearby trash can. I walked back to Qing Dai and sat down, my expression dead serious. Listen fast. This afternoon, find Nurse Ding. Chat with her. Tell her you want to set us up on a date. You want to play matchmaker. Understand? She blinked, confused, but nodded. Tomorrow, when your mom gets here, get Nurse Ding to help you convince her to take you home. If she hesitates, you cry. You scream. You fake a suicide attempt if you have to. Just get out of here. And whatever you do, do not mention me to your parents. I can do that, she said firmly. Good. Give me your home address. I'm going to check the area and find us a place to stay. If I find a rental, look for the windows with 2 pieces of white paper taped to them. That'll be my place. Qing Dai bit her lip, looking at me with wide, searching eyes. Cousin, can I ask you one more question? Speak. Are you only saving me? I looked at her, my face cold. Who else would I save? How many people do you think I can save? I snapped, my voice cold and immediate. Qingdai's face went pale. She recoiled, her shoulders hunching up. No, you have to save my parents too. And my friends. If you can save me, you can't just leave them to die. I felt a massive headache coming on. My patience was wearing thin. Don't start making demands. I've had a rough couple of days, and I'm not in the mood. Then I might as well just die, she whispered, her body trembling. She looked at me with a stubborn, desperate glint in her eyes. What's the point of living if I'm all alone? I went silent, my mind racing for a workaround. I couldn't have my client committing suicide before the rain even started. After a tense moment, I exhaled sharply. Fine. I can't worry about everyone else, but your parents? I'll save them. Happy. Logically, it made sense. A teenage girl wouldn't survive long on her own in an apocalypse. Her parents were her primary support system. Keeping them alive was the best way to ensure she stayed stable and my mission stayed on track. Qingdai's expression softened. She nodded slowly. I understand. As long as my parents are safe. Cousin, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but I'm just so scared. She reached behind her back and pulled out 3 notebooks, pressing them into my hands. I frowned, flipping through the pages. The first notebook was a meticulous diary of everything that had happened to her recently. Every detail, every observation, even things she wasn't sure about were marked clearly. The second was a collection of survival tips and newspaper clippings she'd gathered. The third was the real prize, a map of Longshan City. She had circled key locations, grain stores, hospitals, police stations. There was also her home address, a hand-drawn map of her neighborhood, and the locations of nearby supermarkets and pharmacies. You did all this? I looked at her, genuinely stunned. She lowered her head, looking small. I knew you'd come for me. I guessed you might be an alien or something like that. I was worried you wouldn't understand how things work here, so I prepared. Also, I have over 10,000 yuan. It's buried under the big tree right in front of my apartment building. There's a red dot on the trunk. It's right under that. My jaw nearly hit the floor. 10,000? You're a student. Where did you get that kind of money? Is your family rich? Qingdai's face turned bright red. She looked at her feet, sounding ashamed. I borrowed it from the boys at my school. About 100 of them. Good grief, I muttered, completely floored. You're so young, and you're already a pro at conning men? I didn't con them, she protested, her voice rising in defensive shame before dropping to a whisper. I never said I wouldn't pay them back. If they don't die, I'll work and pay every cent back. I'll sell shoes if I have to. All right, I said, nodding in genuine admiration. This girl was something else. She was barely a teenager, yet she had seen the end of the world coming, tried to warn everyone, endured the mockery, and even when she was thrown into a mental ward, she hadn't stopped preparing. Her mental strength and initiative were enough to put most adults to shame. The data and the money she provided were game changers. She wasn't a burden, she was a high-quality client. I tucked the notebooks away and looked her in the eye, my tone serious. You did great. Leave the rest to me. I'll be waiting for you on the outside. You're too thin. Make sure you eat as much as you can these next few days. I will, she promised. I'm counting on you, cousin. I walked out of the hospital, squinting against the harsh sunlight. Seeing the client and establishing a plan had eased some of the tension, but the fog of uncertainty still hung heavy over me. I wondered if this alien sun would give me cancer before the rain did, but then I realized it didn't matter. If I didn't finish this mission for the company, I was never going home anyway. I pulled out the map. Her neighborhood, the Talon Apartments, was about 9 kilometers away. I could take a taxi, but renting a place wasn't my first priority. I needed intel. As I walked toward the main road, I took a piece of rope from my briefcase, tied one end to the handle, and looped the other firmly around my wrist, hiding it under my trench coat. This city didn't look like the pinnacle of law and order. If a thief on a scooter tried to snatch my bag, they were in for a surprise. I headed toward a large local wet market. I needed to know if the food here was edible for a human from Earth. My plan was to stick to my own supplies initially, but I needed to test the local produce. The market was surprisingly normal, which was almost unsettling. I saw familiar-looking greens mixed with things that were definitely alien. Radishes with strange geometric patterns, giant single-leaf vegetables, and red vines that seemed to creep along the stalls. I walked through the aisles, surreptitiously pinching leaves and stems, tucking them away for later testing while pretending to haggle over prices. I wasn't going to spend a single cent until I knew what was safe. I moved toward the meat and seafood section. The meat stalls were bathed in that familiar pinkish light used to make the flesh look fresher. Apparently, some marketing tactics were universal. There were large slabs of fat and lean meat, and a head of a fierce-looking animal that resembled a bull. If my earth knowledge held up, large mammals were usually a safe bet for protein. Most toxins in nature are found in smaller, more vulnerable creatures that need chemical defenses. In an apocalypse, meat was king, high calorie, and even if it started to turn, it was often safer than mystery plants. Still, I needed to test the vegetables to see if processed foods in the supermarkets would be viable. I reached the aquatic area, where rows of glass tanks lined the floor. Most of the fish looked ordinary enough, but then I stopped dead in my tracks. A massive, gray fish swiveled in its tank, turning to face me directly. Its flat, wide mouth pressed against the glass, and as I got a clear look at its face, the words died in my throat. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the tank, frozen. It was a carp, but it looked like something from a nightmare. It had a human mouth. Not just a resemblance, but a full set of teeth behind a vertical, slit-like opening. It was wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. The stall owner, a middle-aged woman, noticed me staring and walked over with a wide smile. She asked if I wanted it, promising it was fresh. She even offered to knock its teeth out for me for free. I swallowed hard, waved my hand, and backed away. I didn't want anything to do with that creature. I spent the next hour wandering the market. My initial assessment was a mix of relief and caution. Most of the food looked reliable enough to eat, but I couldn't let my guard down yet. I still needed to run proper tests. I left the market and walked about 100 paces until I found a pharmacy. Inside, 2 employees were chatting, completely ignoring me. I headed straight for the supplement aisle. I scanned the shelves until I found a bottle of multivitamins that looked high-end. I pulled a bottle of Centrum I had brought from Earth out of my bag and started comparing the labels. Before the company sent me here, I had stocked up on food, cigarettes, and 10 large bottles of vitamins. I knew that in a survival situation, calories were only half the battle. If I lacked microelements for even a month, my physical performance would tank. Under high stress and physical load, that deficiency could be fatal. As I read the ingredients, the tension in my chest loosened. The components were almost identical. Even the unfamiliar ones looked like variations of things I recognized. It was a 90% match. This meant the biology of this world was close enough to my own that the food wouldn't kill me. I put the bottle back and walked out, feeling much more confident. My next stop was an old video store about 2 kilometers away. When I reached the entrance, a wave of nostalgia hit me. The windows were lined with movie posters and rows of plastic-wrapped discs. It reminded me of my childhood, renting old action movies back home. It was a simpler time. I pushed the door open. The air inside smelled like old paper and cheap plastic. The owner was behind the counter, sorting through a stack of discs. I didn't waste time with small talk. I asked him if he had any disaster movies. He looked up, surprised. He told me disaster films were a niche market and asked what kind I wanted. I told him anything involving viruses, mutated beasts, or alien invasions. Specifically, I wanted stories about ordinary people trying to survive the end of the world. While he searched, I scanned the walls. The movie covers were a goldmine of information. Movies are a reflection of society. By watching how this world imagined disasters, I could understand their logic and how they might react when the real thing hit. I noticed most of the posters were romance films. It seemed their movie industry lacked the budget or technology for big special effects, which explained why disaster films were so rare. The owner returned with 3 scratch discs. He promised they were pure survival stories with no romantic subplots. I paid the 5 yuan rental fee and a 10 yuan deposit for each. Then, I asked him for some history, urban, and military films too. I wanted realism, not trash. He happily obliged, sensing he had found a serious movie buff. Once I had a stack of discs, I leaned in closer and lowered my voice. I asked him if he had that kind of movie. The owner's expression changed instantly. He lowered his voice too, playing dumb at first, But I reminded him I was his best customer of the day. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. He led me through a small door into a cramped back room. It was clearly his living quarters, with a mattress on the floor and a bulky, old-fashioned television. He pulled out a bag of discs with covers featuring women in swimwear. He told me these were 20 yuan each, for sale only, no rentals. I flipped through them, but I wasn't looking for entertainment. I asked him if they were explicit. He laughed, asking what the point would be if they weren't. I picked one at random and asked to test it. He popped it into a VCD player and fast-forwarded through the intro. As the images flickered across the screen, I watched intently. I wasn't interested in the act itself. I was looking at the anatomy. I needed to be absolutely sure that the humans in this world were biologically identical to me. The combat on screen confirmed it. Everything was exactly where it should be. This world wasn't just similar, it was a mirror. To a man like the shop owner, who was raised on a diet of neon lights and cheap booze, this stuff was probably nothing. But when the camera zoomed in, my eyes went wide. I leaned in so close I was practically touching the screen. I needed a clear look at the mechanics. The owner's smug grin started to fade as he watched me. He reached out and patted me on the back, looking genuinely concerned. "Hey, buddy," he said. "Is it really that good? You're about to crawl inside the TV." I straightened up and rubbed my eyes, feeling a wave of relief. The anatomy was perfect. The muscle structure, the proportions, even the way the body moved. It was all identical to a human from Earth. It confirmed my theory. This world was a biological mirror. If the apocalypse turned people into monsters, I wouldn't have to worry about weird, alien mutations. They would be standard zombies with standard human weaknesses. "Sorry," I said, giving him a sheepish laugh. "I just got a bit carried away." "So, how about this one?" he asked, holding up the disc. "You want it?" I shook my head and tightened my grip on my bag. "I'll pass for today. Maybe next time. Thanks anyway, boss. Great recommendation. But you were so into it. How can you?" The owner stopped mid-sentence. His eyes went wide, staring directly at my hand hidden under my trench coat. I had moved my hand slightly to adjust my bag, but from his angle, it looked like I was doing something else. His jaw dropped. "Wait, you're already finished?" "What? No, it's not what you think." I snapped, my face heating up. I didn't wait for an explanation. "Thanks again. Stay safe." I turned on my heel and bolted out of the shop. Behind me, I could hear the owner losing his mind. "You young punks. You come in here, watch for 3 minutes for free, and don't even buy the disc? Go see a doctor, you freak." I ignored him and kept walking. My next stop was the residential area mentioned in Qingdai's notes. I took a bus to the Talent County district. The neighborhood didn't have high walls or fancy gates. Standing on the sidewalk, I could see rows of drab, 6-story concrete buildings. They were old, covered in thin, spiderweb-like cracks, but they looked sturdy enough. Building number 7 was visible from the street. I didn't go in immediately. Instead, I pulled out the map Qingdai had drawn and walked the perimeter of the complex. I spent about 40 minutes circling the area, verifying every detail. The girl was incredibly meticulous. She had used a ruler for every line, marking the grocery stores, print shops, and alleys with perfect scale. Satisfied, I walked inside. There was no security, just a guard post that looked like it hadn't been used in years. I found Unit 2 of Building 7. The air near the entrance smelled like damp trash. I noticed a small, square chute near the door where residents tossed their garbage. It was an old design, convenient, but it smelled terrible and clogged easily. In front of the building stood an ancient, gnarled tree. I walked around it, scanning the roots. There it was, a faint red dot painted on the bark. This was the spot. I checked to make sure no one was watching, pulled a pair of gloves from my bag, and started digging. 10 centimeters down, I hit metal. I pulled out a rusted biscuit tin. Inside were rolls of small bills and a handful of coins. I didn't count it. I just shoved the tin into my bag and kicked the dirt back into the hole. I looked up at the windows. Qingdai lived on the 5th floor. I noticed "for rent" signs posted on the 2nd and 5th floors with phone numbers scribbled on them. If I played this right, I could move in right across the hall from her. I needed to make a call, but I didn't want to use a traceable line. I spotted a middle-aged woman walking by and put on my best lost student face. "Excuse me, sister? My phone died. Could I use yours for a second?" 30 minutes later, I was standing on the fifth-floor landing. A middle-aged man in a gray shirt was fumbling with a set of keys. "You've got a good eye, Xiao Su," he said, opening the door. "These buildings used to be for the elite, professors, officials, veterans. My neighbor across the hall, Old Chung, was a security captain in the military. It's an old place, but it's safe and quiet." He led me inside. "My son insisted I move in with him, otherwise I'd never leave. I've taken good care of this place. What do you think?" "Your son sounds like a good man," I replied, playing along. "I wish I had his success. My parents would be so proud." The landlord beamed at the compliment. I walked through the apartment. It was a two-bedroom unit, about 70 square meters. It was basic, no appliances, no flushing toilet, but it had the essentials. "I provide the furniture," the landlord explained. "But you'll need your own electronics. For cooking, there's a gas station outside where you can rent a tank. 60 yuan a tank, 100 yuan deposit. The morning market is just a street away." We stopped in the living room. "I like it," I said. "How much?" 500 a month. 1 month's deposit since you seem like a decent kid." "Deal," I said. Then I paused, acting like I just had a thought. "Wait, you said your son moved out too. Is the apartment downstairs empty?" "Yeah, that's my son's place. He hasn't bothered renting it out yet." "What?" "Well," I said, looking a bit embarrassed. "I moved here for work, but I have a friend, a girl, who's coming in a few days. I wanted to surprise her by having a place ready nearby. I promise, 1 person per apartment. No trouble." The landlord chuckled. "Trying to impress a lady, huh? I get it. No problem. There is one thing, though," I added, looking down at my feet. "I'm a bit short on cash since I just got here. I can pay the first month for both places right now, but can I give you the deposits in 2 weeks? We can put it in the contract. If I trash the place or cause trouble, you can kick me out and keep the rent." The landlord hesitated for a moment, then reached out and clapped me on the shoulder. "You're a real one, kid," the landlord said, flashing a grin. "I won't let a little thing like a deposit stand in the way of a young man and his love life. It's a deal." An hour later, I stood alone in my new, empty rental. I chewed on a bitter, nameless vegetable leaf I'd picked up earlier, staring out the window. The setting sun washed everything in a hazy, golden-gray light. My head spun. In a single day, I had crossed into a parallel world, infiltrated a mental asylum, and rented 2 apartments. While I was busy, the adrenaline kept me sharp. But now, in the silence, the weight of it all hit me. It felt like a dream, yet it was terrifyingly real. I leaned forward until my forehead pressed against the cold glass. I closed my eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. The bitterness in my mouth grew stronger. Panic and confusion, the things I'd been suppressing, finally clawed their way out. I was just a normal person. I didn't want this. Why was I forced into this job? Why was the world ending? And why, of all people, did it have to be me? I clutched my chest, my heart racing like a trapped bird. I eventually slid down the wall and slumped onto the floor. My chest heaved. Back home, I always thought I was brave. I was the girl who never let her back bend, even when work felt like a meat grinder. But right now, I was terrified. I messed up. I whispered into the empty room. I messed up from the start. If I hadn't gone out drinking with that client, I wouldn't have offended him. If I hadn't offended him, I wouldn't have needed a new job. And if I hadn't looked for work, I wouldn't have been abducted by this insane Tiandao company. Company? Are you there? Can anyone hear me? I stared at the empty air, waiting for a voice, a glitch, anything. Nothing. I was talking to myself. I felt like a corporate slave again. In the office, your value is just your market price minus the cost of replacing you. I used to play that game perfectly. I managed my bosses, kept my confidence high, and watched others get fired while I stayed safe. But this company didn't have a boss I could talk to. It didn't even have a face. I sat there until the sun vanished. The room turned pitch black. I rubbed my face hard, took one more deep breath, and stood up to flick on the light. The breakdown was over. It was time to stop dreaming and start fighting. Actually, the company ignoring me was a blessing. It meant no one was watching my every move. Since I arrived, I'd felt like 1,000 eyes were on me. I'd been holding it in all day because I was too paranoid to even use the bathroom. I wondered if the protagonists in those web novels ever had to deal with that. The next morning, sunlight hit my face. I squinted, my eyelids heavy. For a split second, I hoped I'd wake up back in my own bed. I opened my eyes. Same strange bedroom. Same mission. I'd only managed 3 hours of sleep. I washed my face, sat at the small table, and pulled out my notebook and a piece of bread. I had a plan to coordinate with Qingdai. I'd told her I was right across the hall. If she got out, she'd find me. I decided to give her 3 days. If she wasn't out by then, I'd have to go back to the hospital. But she wasn't the priority yet. Survival was. I had 6 days left. I needed food, medicine, and water. Especially water. Once the rain started, the tap water would become a death sentence. Water is heavy, bulky, and impossible to compress. If I stored it all in one spot, the weight might collapse the floor. That was why I rented 2 units. I needed to spread the load. A person needs about 2 liters of drinking water a day. 1 ton could last a year and a half, but I couldn't count on normal conditions. Stress, injuries, and the possibility of Qingdai's parents or other survivors joining me would skyrocket the usage. I decided on 4 tons of water, split between the 2 apartments and placed against the load-bearing walls. I needed 4,100-liter barrels. I'd buy bigger ones if I could find them and use wooden planks to distribute the weight. I also added water purification tablets and plastic wrap to my list to prevent evaporation. My pen skipped as I moved to the food section. I needed staples, rice and flour, but buying in bulk would look suspicious. I'd have to buy them far away, pack them in cardboard boxes, and have them delivered at night. I need to bribe the security guard at the gate, maybe tell him I was just moving in. Next was fat and protein. Cooking oil was easy. For protein, I wanted powder, but this world didn't seem to have a fitness culture. I hadn't seen a single gym since I got here. Milk powder would have to be the backup. It was nutrient-dense and easy to store. Everything else would have to come from vitamin pills. I flipped the page. Now, the most important thing, weapons. This world was industrialized, meaning guns existed. But I was a stranger here. Qingdai told me civilians couldn't own guns. The legal risk was too high, and my 7,000 yuan wouldn't go far on the black market. I needed a different way to protect us. I recounted my cash last night. I had a little over 25,000 yuan. It wasn't nearly enough to stockpile everything I needed. I realized I had to give up on the idea of getting guns. Even if I could find them, they wouldn't be very useful. I hadn't practiced, so I'd waste ammo like crazy, and finding more would be impossible. Plus, the noise would just attract the monsters. A gun's best use in the short term was scaring off other survivors, and for that, an empty chamber worked just as well as a loaded one. I decided to focus all my resources on cold weapons. Long-reach weapons were the best bet. I planned to visit a hardware store for steel pipes and weld them onto knives or axes. If I could get my hands on a bow and arrow, that would be even better. I'd have plenty of time to practice once we were holed up in the safe house. I pulled out a map and searched for the location of a local slaughterhouse. Back when I was a young punk, I wouldn't have blinked at the thought of hacking at something living. I might have even enjoyed the adrenaline. But I'd been out in the real world for too long. I had respect for the law and a growing understanding of how fragile life really was. I wasn't afraid of a fight, but actually cutting someone, even a zombie, would probably make me freeze in terror. A man's greatest virtue is never overestimating himself. My most urgent task, besides spending a day learning the layout of the city, was to find a slaughterhouse. I needed to kill something living. I needed to desensitize myself before the world ended. 5 days remained until the apocalypse. The sun was setting around 7 in the evening when I returned to my rented room. I ditched my old clothes for a local tank top and cargo shorts to blend in. It had been a productive day. I'd spent half the morning in a bookstore, using my speed reading skills to devour encyclopedias and deepen my understanding of this world. The rest of the day was spent scouting markets, checking prices, and making a budget. I even spent some time sucking up to the apartment security guards. After crunching the numbers, my money was just barely enough. I had calculated for a surplus of supplies. If I only focused on food, I had enough to feed 4 people for months. The purchasing power in this world was actually impressive. If I didn't need specialized survival gear, this money could have lasted 2 years. I dropped my backpack and pulled out my notebook. Then, I reached into a hidden compartment and pulled out 2 plastic bags. One had rice, the other had stir-fried pork. I'd taken a risk and eaten at a small local restaurant today. The food was decent, and they actually used normal rice and chopsticks, which was a relief. These 2 bags were my leftovers. As I opened the bags, a wave of heat hit my fingers. I froze. The food was still warm. I'd read stories about magical storage rings where time stood still, keeping food fresh forever. Seeing it happen in real life felt surreal. Was time actually frozen inside my storage space? That felt too cliché. I took a bite of the rice and chewed. My expression changed. Then I tried the meat. It wasn't that time had stopped. The temperature hadn't just stayed the same. The rice felt like it had been reheated, and the flavor had shifted slightly. The space was a perfect thermal insulator, but molecules could still move. I wondered if bacteria could survive in there. If they could, even magical pills would eventually expire. I slapped my forehead and laughed at myself. Why was I trying to use science to explain magic? Ever since I crossed over, nothing had been normal. But a part of me felt a bit sad. I'd spent my whole life being educated in science. If I couldn't believe in that, what was left? I pushed the thoughts aside and started eating while organizing my notes. Halfway through my meal, a knock sounded at the door. I jumped, dropped my chopsticks, and rushed to the peephole. It was Qingdai. She was standing there alone, looking nervous and fidgety. I threw the door open and pulled her inside quickly. She gasped, startled by the sudden movement, but calmed down the moment she saw my face. I got out, cousin, she whispered, her voice trembling. Great job, I said, genuinely impressed. When did they let you go? Any trouble? Just this noon, she said, hanging her head, unable to look me in the eye. My mom just left for work. It wasn't hard. I don't know what happened with that nurse, but she kept speaking up for me. She told me privately that I still need treatment and told me to have you call her to report on my condition. I nodded quickly and led her to the table. Sit. Let's talk. She sat on the edge of the chair, looking small. Cousin, what do we do now? I went to the kitchen, grabbed a cup of tap water, and set it in front of her. Leave everything to me. From now on, you just do exactly what I tell you. But before I give you instructions, we need 3 rules. You have to burn these into your brain. Understand? I understand, she said firmly. Tell me. Good. First, never act on impulse. Second, never hide even the smallest detail from me. Third, whatever task I give you, you complete it perfectly. Can you do that? I can, she said, finally looking up at me. Good. You're smart, I can tell. I believe in you. I gave her a thumbs up. You only really need to do one thing. Trust me completely. I know you're scared, but don't judge me by my promises. Judge me by my track record. And I have never failed a job. Her eyes brightened with a flicker of hope. Really? Only liars make excuses, I said, trying to keep her spirits up. If I was going to finish this mission, I had to keep my client's mental health from collapsing. Tell me what to do next, she asked. I was about to speak when my eyes drifted to the power outlet in the corner. I'd been using my portable power banks, but they wouldn't last forever. My phone was too important to lose. The outlet had 2 holes, and while my charger fit, I hadn't dared to plug it in yet for fear of frying the battery. First, a question, I said. What's the voltage of these outlets? 220 volts, she answered. Do you have a scientist here named Volta? I asked. What's the unit of measurement for voltage? We don't have a scientist named Volta, she said, looking confused. The unit is named after our physicist, Li Songxi. So, the unit is called a Songxi. I blinked. A Songxi? Not a volt. No, she said. It's a Songxi. I stared at the outlet. It looked like a volt, it acted like a volt, but here, it was a Songxi. This world was going to be a lot more complicated than I thought. I couldn't help but marvel at the company's translation software. It was terrifyingly efficient. It didn't just translate words, it adapted to the local culture in real time. Of course, it couldn't fix my handwriting. Nobody here could read my notes, but that didn't matter. I looked at the power outlet again. If the voltage was 220, it matched most countries back on Earth. That wasn't a coincidence. It was the sweet spot for economic efficiency. It meant the laws of physics and science still applied here. My experience and common sense weren't useless after all. What's wrong, cousin? Qingdai asked, her eyes full of curiosity. I shook my head and pulled out a notebook. Nothing. Now, tell me about your parents. I need details. Don't leave anything out. I needed a rock-solid story so I could come and go from her house without raising suspicion. If I played this right, I could help her parents too. Qingdai nodded, but then she hesitated. Brother, she whispered, if I tell you everything, will you tell me about the stars? Deal, I said. Start talking. An hour later, she leaned back, clutching an empty water glass. That's everything I know. I closed my notebook. I had enough. Good. I'm going to your house tomorrow. You have 2 jobs. What are they? Tell your mom to cook a big, hearty meal, I said, and find a way to get me 2,000 yuan. For days remained until the end of the world. I spent the next day in a blur of motion. My 4th-floor apartment was starting to look like a warehouse. I spent the morning scouting and the afternoon at the wholesale markets. I bought 10 large water buckets and dozens of bags of powdered milk. I grabbed 20 bags of salt, vitamins, basic medicines, gauze, and alcohol. I even hit a grain shop 6 kilometers away, paying a deposit for a massive order of oil and rice to be delivered at night. Then, I bought the most important items, portable plastic toilets and a mountain of trash bags. When the rain starts, water will be gold. Even if the sewers still work, nobody is going to waste clean water flushing a toilet. You use a bag, you tie it up, and you throw it out. Besides, if these monsters track by scent, a pile of waste might actually work as a biological distraction. It was a grim thought, but I wanted to keep some dignity as long as I could. I also bought a large stock of feminine hygiene products. Qingdai would need them, but they had other uses too. They make excellent emergency boot insoles. As I crossed the last item off my list, my stomach growled. It was 6 o'clock, time for dinner at Qingdai's. I had studied her parents through her stories. Her father, Fu Hu, was a retired soldier. He'd been injured and out of the service for years, but that kind of training doesn't just vanish. With a little coaching, he'd be better than any civilian. Her mother, Zhang Wan, worked at a textile factory. She knew how to sew. That was a vital skill. I planned to buy heavy fabric and metal sheets tomorrow. If she could sew those sheets into the lining of thick coats, we'd have DIY armor. It was simple, effective, and necessary. Plus, if I played my cards right, Fu Hu might be able to help me source weapons, maybe a bow or some crossbows. I heard footsteps and muffled talking in the hallway. A key turned, and the door across from mine clicked shut. They were home. I checked myself in the mirror, straightened my clothes, and grabbed 3 movie discs in my notebook. I stood in front of their door, took a deep breath to set my expression, and knocked. The door opened. A middle-aged man with dark skin and a fierce, rugged face stared at me. He looked like he could break a man in half. Who are you? Fu Hu asked, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Fu Hu. I acted slightly surprised, then let my face settle into a calm, professional mask. Yeah, that's me. Do I know you? He stepped forward, blocking the doorway, sizing me up. I gave a small, polite smile. Forgive the intrusion. I'm your new neighbor, Li Haoqing. Li Haoqing, I've never heard of you. Did old Li tell you my name? He sounded annoyed. A total stranger showing up and using his full name wasn't a great first impression. I didn't blink. I know exactly who you are. 12th Army Group, 191st Division, 5th Regiment, 3rd Battalion, 7th Company, 3rd Platoon, 2nd Squad. Soldier Fu Hu. Your company commander was Huang Chongwan. They called him the Cannon. And you served alongside Yang Huai. Fu Hu's face went pale. He stepped out into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind him, his body tensing into a combat stance. Who the hell are you? My smile vanished. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice turning cold and authoritative. Let me introduce myself properly. I am Li Haoqing, Director of the National Critical Risk Intervention Bureau. The what? Fu Hu stammered. He'd clearly never heard of it. We call it the Bureau of Intervention, I said firmly. You were too low-level to know we existed. We report directly to the top. I pulled out my phone, a high-end model that didn't exist in this world, and swiped the screen. I turned it around to show him a digital file featuring his own military ID and service record. I have your files, I continued. As for how I know you? Simple. The Bureau was screening soldiers for a special training program years ago. You were on the shortlist. I wasn't with the department yet, but I reviewed your records later. Your evaluations were impressive. I don't forget faces. Fu Hu was reeling. He looked at the phone, then at me, his brain trying to process the high-definition screen and the detailed information. It was too advanced to be fake, and I knew things only a high-ranking official could know. Director Lee, he stammered, his hostility evaporating into pure confusion. Just call me Lee, I said, letting the tension melt away into a friendly grin. Look, old Fu, it's a coincidence that we're neighbors. But I've run into a bit of an emergency. I came over to see if I could borrow your television for a moment. I didn't realize it was you until you opened the door. Can I come in? Oh, yes, of course. Please, come in, Fu said, stepping aside and ushering me in with a dazed look on his face. I walked in like I owned the place. The living room was small, connected to a dining area. Qingdai was there, wearing pajamas, hunched over the table pretending to do homework. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, but she quickly looked back down, acting focused. Qingdai, move your things, Fu barked, trying to regain his composure. We have a guest. Go study in your room. Fu turned back and flashed a quick smile at me. This is my daughter, he said, gesturing toward the girl. Hi. Qingdai mumbled, sounding annoyed. She grabbed her homework and scurried back into her room as fast as she could. Just then, a woman named Zhang Wan walked out of the kitchen, drying her wet hands on a towel. She stopped dead when she saw me, her eyes darting toward Fu with suspicion. Who's this? An old comrade from the service, Fu said, giving her a sharp look. Zhang Wan rolled her eyes, clearly not buying it, but she turned around and headed back into the kitchen without a word. Fu looked at me and pointed toward the sofa. Director Lee, please. Let's sit and talk. We both sat down. Zhang Wan returned briefly to set 2 glasses of water on the table before disappearing back into the kitchen to finish cooking. Silence hung in the air for a moment. Fu was clearly itching to grill me. Fu began cautiously. Director Lee, do you mind if I ask a few questions? Go ahead, I replied smoothly. But keep in mind, some things are classified. I won't be able to answer everything. Of course, I just want to know, what exactly is this National Affairs Bureau? When was it formed? What do you actually do? I leaned back, looking him straight in the eye. It was established 30 years ago. Our job is to predict, intervene in, and manage major national uncertainties. We handle the risks that stay off the radar. We are the safety net for national security. Fu narrowed his eyes. You said earlier that my rank was too low to know about you. Why are you telling me all this now? I smiled and took a sip of water. It's simple. Before long, the entire country is going to know this department exists. Why? He asked, leaning in. Instead of answering, I pulled a disc from my jacket and handed it to him. Do me a favor and put this in your player. Don't worry, it's just a movie. You can watch it too. Fu hesitated, staring at the disc, then stood up to load it. While his back was turned, I crossed my legs and pulled out a notebook, resting it on the arm of the sofa. I started scribbling notes with a focused expression. When Fu turned back and saw me working, he looked bewildered. This, I said, waving my pen. It has nothing to do with you. Keep asking your questions, old Fu. If I can answer, I will. We're on the same side, and I don't want any misunderstandings. Fu nodded and sat back down. You say you're a director, but you look like you're in your 20s. Isn't that a bit young for such a heavy position? I'm actually in my 30s, I lied effortlessly. I just have a young face. But you're right, even at 30, it's unusual. The reason is simple. People like me are hard to find. My role requires mastery of foreign cultures, multiple languages, advanced mathematics, physics, computer science, and psychology. There are only a handful of people in the country who fit the bill. I just moved back to this old neighborhood for some peace and quiet. I didn't expect to end up as your neighbor. Fu was speechless. Everything about me felt strange. The secret department, the advanced tech, the young age. It felt wrong, yet my explanations were perfectly logical. He didn't know what to believe. I know you're skeptical, I said, breaking his train of thought. Look at this. I unlocked my Xiaomi 6 smartphone and tossed it to him. He caught it with practiced reflexes, staring at the screen. He had noticed the phone earlier and knew it was something special. What is this? He asked, mesmerized by the high-resolution display. What are these characters? It's a smartphone, I said calmly. The operating system has been heavily modified by my department. The text is an internal code only we can read. This device integrates technologies that don't even exist on the market yet. It was developed during a secret overseas mission I led. Fu played with the phone until the screen locked, then looked up at me. Aren't you telling me a bit too much? I nodded. Good. You've still got that soldier's instinct. But it doesn't matter. A year ago, I sent all the manufacturing data back home. Mass production started 6 months ago. Once our department goes public, this tech will be released as a civilian product. Everyone will be able to buy one. Really? Fuhu's eyes widened. He was hooked. How much would something like that cost? Maybe 8 or 10,000 yuan, I said. Expensive, but there will be installment plans. Before he could process the price, I pressed my advantage. I know you're still confused about why I'm here. To be honest, I'm hiding from my superiors. My mission is over, and my declassification period ends next month. There's an opening for a deputy director position that should be mine, but people are trying to steal it while I'm away. That's why I rented this place in secret. Meeting you was an accident. I just wanted to watch some TV. As long as you keep my secret, we're fine. Fuhu's suspicion hadn't fully vanished, but he was wavering. Is it really okay to tell me all this? I laughed and leaned back, looking at the TV. It doesn't matter. You're not in the loop, so you can't affect anything. Besides, I have more files to decode that will secure my promotion regardless. I held up my notebook, showing him the same strange code that was on the phone. Fuhu fell silent. The story was too big to grasp, and I didn't act like a typical government official, but he couldn't find a single hole in my story. Everything I showed him was beyond his understanding of the world. Old Fu, I said, keeping my eyes on the screen. Meeting like this is fate. Most of my people are being watched right now. If you're willing to help me run a few errands, I'd appreciate it. Money isn't an issue. In 2 weeks, this will all be over. If you're looking for a better job then, I can help you out. Fuhu hesitated, then finally spoke. If you don't want to help me, you don't have to. I won't interfere with your life. I appreciate that, Director, Fuhu said. Then he paused. Have you eaten yet? I looked at him and shook my head. No. Then stay for dinner, he offered. Is that convenient? I asked. Of course. I'll go check on the food. Fuhu stood up and walked toward the kitchen, glancing back at me one last time before closing the door halfway behind him. Zhangwan stopped her spatula midair and leaned toward her husband. Who is that? Who is that guy? Why did you bring him here? Keep your voice down, Fuhu hissed. There's something wrong with this kid. They whispered in the kitchen, their voices low and tense. Zhangwan pressed him for details, her face tight with worry. Fuhu frowned, looking back toward the living room where I sat. I don't know, he admitted. He just showed up. Claims he's a high-level official from the National Security Bureau, but I've never even heard of that department. He had an ID, and he knew my entire career history. I can't tell if he's the real deal or not. He paused, thinking about the phone I had shown him. But he's got high-tech gear. The kind of equipment ordinary people can't get their hands on. It's possible he's telling the truth, but it feels too surreal. I don't dare offend him. If he really is a high-ranking official, we'll be in deep trouble. What if he's a scammer? Zhangwan whispered. Old Fu, you need to be careful. You used to be in the force. If he asks for money, we're calling the police. Don't worry, Fuhu replied, trying to sound confident. I asked him to stay for dinner. I'll try to trip him up. If he's a fake, he won't be able to fool me. Just watch my lead. He looked at the stove and sighed. I bought all this good food to help our daughter recover. Now a stranger is eating it. Just get it ready, Fuhu said. Tell Qingdai to lock her door. She can eat later. Out in the living room, I ignored their whispering. I kept the TV running at double speed, my eyes scanning the screen while I filled 2 pages of my notebook with observations. When the last dish was placed on the table, Fuhu called out to me. Director Li, are you finished? I paused the TV, snapped my notebook shut, and stood up with a polite smile. Sorry for the intrusion, I said as I walked to the table. Fuhu introduced his wife, Zhangwan, and then introduced me to her as Li Haoqing, a director from the National Security Bureau. I nodded to her and sat down. The room went quiet for a moment. Fuhu poured a glass of liquor and pushed it toward me. Director Li, like you said, meeting is fate. Let me toast you. I raised a hand to decline. I apologize. I never drink while I'm on duty. The couple exchanged a look. Right, less alcohol is better for the health, Zhangwan said quickly, pushing a plate of food toward me. Directorly, I heard you mention that bureau earlier. I've never heard of it. When did the country start such a department? It's been around a long time. I started, then paused. I turned my head toward Qingdai's bedroom door, then looked back at them. Is that your daughter in there? Why isn't she eating with us? Oh, no need, Zhangwan said, her face clouding over. She just eats snacks. Don't worry about her. Please, continue. What is your daughter's name? I asked, changing the subject. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Fu Hu and Zhang Wan became guarded. Zhang Wan even nudged Fu Hu under the table. Her name is Fu Qingdai, Fu Hu said cautiously. Why? I let the silence hang for a second, looking concerned. That child, has she run into some trouble lately? Her mental state doesn't look very healthy to me. Fu Hu's eyes widened. He remembered I had mentioned being an expert in psychology earlier. Directorly, you can really see a problem just by looking? I gave him a calm, professional smile. Of course, if you're trained well enough, you can see it in a glance. It seems your daughter is struggling. Bring her out. I'll take a look at her. I won't claim to be better than a world-class specialist, but I'm certainly better than those third-rate doctors in the clinics. Before Fu Hu could even respond, Zhang Wan was already on her feet. She went to the bedroom and brought Qingdai out. The girl sat at the table, her head bowed, refusing to speak. Say something, Zhang Wan nudged her. Greet him. Call him Uncle Li. You Uncle Li, Qingdai whispered. She bit her lip, shot a terrified glance at me, and looked back at the floor. Director Li, please, look at her, Zhang Wan pleaded. Lately she's been quiet. Fu Hu interrupted sternly. Don't interfere. Let the director do his work. He was testing me, watching to see if I was a fraud. I leaned forward slightly, pretending to study Qingdai's face. I stayed silent for 2 full minutes, letting the tension build. Finally, I spoke. This child, looking at her complexion and demeanor, she's under far too much pressure. I even sense suicidal tendencies. At her age, this is highly unusual. Zhang Wan shot a look at Fu Hu that said I told you so. Fu Hu looked annoyed, clearly thinking his wife was being too easily swayed. Half her grades in math and physics started to drop first. I asked suddenly. Zhang Wan gasped. Yes, exactly. Her math scores are getting worse every day. Director Li, how could you possibly know that? It's a matter of probability, I said smoothly. Qingdai, look up at me. I want to ask you a few questions. The girl looked up, her eyes trembling. I asked her about her school schedule, what time she ate lunch, and who she sat with. I fired off 20 mundane questions about her daily life. Fu Hu and Zhang Wan looked confused, unable to see where I was going with this. After the 20th question, I took a sip of water and smiled. The problem is very clear now. What is it? Zhang Wan asked breathlessly. First, as I said, academic pressure. But the second point is more complex. I don't have another problem. Qingdai snapped, her hand gripping her thigh tightly. You do, I said, my voice firm and knowing. And it's a boy. He's not in your class, probably the class next door. He isn't great at studying, but he's good at sports. You were together for about 2 months before he left you for someone else. You tried to go back to him, but he humiliated you. Am I right? I stared directly into her eyes. Qingdai's eyes filled with tears instantly. Her grip on her leg tightened until her knuckles were white. Then, she burst into loud, uncontrollable sobs and buried her face in her mother's lap. The parents were stunned. The hospital hadn't been able to figure out what was wrong, but I had diagnosed the root cause in minutes. They looked at me with newfound awe. Was this the capability of a top-tier secret agent? I knew it. Zhang Wan cried, hugging her daughter. It was just stress and a breakup, and you wanted to send her to a mental asylum. She glared at Fu Hu, feeling vindicated. Director Li, Zhang Wan asked urgently, how do we fix this? How do we treat her? I looked at them both, my expression serious. It's simple, but we need to talk about the real issue. The reason she's like this isn't just school or a boy. It's both of you. Your behavior right now is only making her problems worse. Zhang Wan looked embarrassed. Kids these days are just so sensitive. In our time. I sighed, cutting her off. There is a saying by Vladimir Shuchuan. There is only one truly serious philosophical problem, I said, leaning back, and that is suicide. I watched them flinch. Humans are creatures that need meaning to survive. In my line of work, you learn that quickly. Dai suffered a massive blow to her sense of self at school. I continued, my voice calm and professional. Then she came home, only to be misunderstood by the two people she trusts most. The problem isn't just a boy, it's the isolation. If you keep pushing her, she'll develop severe suicidal tendencies and hallucinations. Luckily, she's not seeing things yet. You need to help her recover now, before it's too late. Do not provoke her. Zhangwan's face went pale. Director Lee, what do we do? When can she go back to school? Beside her, Fu, who looked like he wanted to swallow his own tongue. He let out a sharp, frustrated sound. Stop talking about school. Can't you see how much you've hurt her already? I pulled out a small notebook and scribbled a few notes. Her condition is serious. To be honest, there aren't many psychologists in Longshan who can handle this. Mental health resources in this country are weak. Fu, who swallowed hard, his eyes pleading. I just moved back here. I don't know anyone. Do you have someone you can recommend? I shook my head slowly. My mentor could have done it, but he passed away last year. Could you do it? Zhangwan asked immediately. Don't be ridiculous. Fu, who snapped at her, though his eyes stayed on me. Director Lee is a busy man. He doesn't have time to play doctor. He turned to me, lowering his voice. But, Director Lee, could you at least give us some pointers? Tell us what to do. I sighed, looking conflicted. It's not something I can explain in 5 minutes. How about this? We live right across the hall from each other. I'm out during the day, but I'm home in the evenings. Since we're neighbors, I can spend 2 hours a night working with her. In 7 days, she should be ready to go back to school. Zhangwan practically jumped out of her seat. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Director Lee. Director Lee? No, he's Director Lee to the office, Fu, who said, his face flushed with gratitude and alcohol. He raised his glass high. To me, he's brotherly. I'm a simple man, brother. Everything I want to say is in this glass. He downed it in one go. Dai kept her head low, looking embarrassed, but I caught her eye. We should wait 2 weeks before you start calling me that. I joked. Then I looked at her seriously. Dai, are you willing to come over and chat with me in the evenings? No pressure. Just talking. She bit her lip and gave a small, hesitant nod. Then it's settled, I said, spreading my hands. The rest of the dinner went exactly as I planned. I had written the script, and they had walked right into the roles. I dominated the conversation, dropping hints about my high-level clearance and my work at the mysterious 6th Bureau. Whenever they asked a question I didn't want to answer, I had a simple shield: national security. I can't disclose that. An hour later, I was full, slightly buzzed, and heading for the door. In my pocket, I felt the 231 yuan and 50 cents Dai had secretly slipped me earlier. Fu, who stood at the door, his face bright red from the liquor. Director Lee, I can't tell you how glad I am we met. If there's anything you need, anything at all, just call me. I waved him off. I might have something for you later, but don't worry about it now. Get some sleep. Wait, Director Lee. Fu, who called out, his tongue tripping over his words. I wanted to ask. He hesitated, the words stuck in his throat. I smiled. I knew exactly what he wanted. Old Fu, don't be shy with me. Everyone wants to move up in the world. You want me to help you find a job, right? He nodded sheepishly. He knew I had real power, and he desperately wanted that 10,000 yuan salary I'd mentioned earlier. I won't lie to you, I said. I have the connections, but I can't give you 100% guarantee yet. Let me check a few things. I'll give you an answer tomorrow. Sound good? More than good. Thank you, Director Lee. I stepped back into my own apartment and closed the door. The silence hit me hard. Suddenly, I felt a wave of homesickness so strong it made my chest ache. I used to hate going home for the holidays, but now, trapped in this mission, I missed it more than anything. I rubbed my eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to focus. That night, the nightmares came. I was standing on a street corner in a ruined city. Dark clouds choked the sky, and a freezing rain poured down. The streets were filled with rotting, walking corpses, mindless shells wandering through the wasteland. I was wearing a raincoat, crouching in the shadows, watching them. Suddenly, a zombie lunged at me from behind, its jaws wide. I turned, snarling, and tried to bite it back. I bolted upright in bed, gasping for air. My neck felt tight, my throat like it had been scraped with a razor. The sheets were soaked with sweat, leaving a damp outline of my body on the mattress. I forced myself to breathe. It was just a dream. My nerves were fraying. I reached for my notebook on the nightstand. The grain shipment was coming in tonight. I needed to buy more supplies during the day, and I needed to practice. I needed to get used to the sight of blood and the pressure of killing. I looked at the calendar on the wall. A row of red X's marked the passing days. Only 3 days left until the end of the world. I got up, washed my face, and packed a change of clothes. I needed to head to the slaughterhouse. I'd asked around at the market and found one on the outskirts of town. It was a messy, loosely managed place that mostly handled pigs. But the pigs here weren't like the ones back home. They looked more like wild boars, with sharp heads and small ears. They looked aggressive. Perfect for practice. As I approached the tin-roofed factory, the stench hit me first, a thick, nauseating mix of animal waste and raw blood. I stopped and closed my eyes, doing a final mental check. It's fine, I told myself. Asterisk, you've been in fights before. This is just training. It's like taking a bath. Asterisk. I took a deep breath and walked toward the open entrance. The air inside was heavy, vibrating with the metallic scent of death. The slaughterhouse floor was a river of blood and filth. Swarms of flies buzzed over the concrete, thick enough to choke on. Workers in heavy rubber boots pushed carts loaded with plastic buckets, each one overflowing with raw, glistening organs. I kept my head down. I looked too clean for a place like this, and the workers noticed, but nobody stopped me. I headed toward the back, following the sound of heavy machinery and dying squeals. Under an open tin roof, I found the killing floor. Men were using electric prods and long poles to corral the animals. The ground was a sludge of blood and mud. I spotted a man in his 50s, thick-armed with a faded tattoo, barking orders. The others called him Brother Lou. He was clearly the one in charge. If I wanted in, I had to go through him. I walked up to him. He stopped talking the moment my shadow hit him. He looked me up and down, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" he barked. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "Don't be nervous, brother," I said, putting on my best awkward young man act. "My name is Lin Shuro. I'm a bit embarrassed to say this, but I've been out of work for a while. My dad's old friend offered me a job as a butcher, but I've never done it before. I don't want to embarrass my father, so I wanted to find a place to practice first." Brother Lou's mouth twitched. "You want to practice? You think this is a hobby? Get out of here. You're wasting my time." I didn't blink. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a 100 yuan bill, holding it low so only he could see. "I'm not asking for a free lesson. Just let me have one pig to practice on. I don't want anything else." Lou stared at the money. His tone softened, but he still shook his head. "Still can't do it. You're a total amateur. If you get hurt, who's paying the medical bills?" I pulled out another 100. 200 yuan total. He snatched the money and shoved it into his pocket. "Fine, but stay sharp. I'll be watching you." 3 hours later, I was slumped against a wall in the shade. My face was flushed, splattered with red like I'd been hit with a gallon of tomato sauce. I'd changed into a fresh set of clothes I brought with me, but I still felt filthy. Across from me, Brother Lou looked pale. He was staring at me like I was a monster. "Kid," he stammered. You had enough yet?" I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to vomit. I nodded slowly. "You coming back tomorrow?" he asked, his voice jumping an octave. I could tell what he was thinking. He'd thought he was making an easy $200, but he'd just watched a lunatic at work. I hadn't just been practicing. I'd been chasing those pigs like a man possessed, hacking at them with a desperate, clumsy rage. I looked less like a butcher and more like a serial killer having a breakdown. "Don't come back," Lou said quickly. "The manager will be here tomorrow. He won't allow it." He paused, looking at me with genuine fear. "Look, tell me the truth. Are you in some kind of trouble? Are you practicing for something else? Don't throw your life away, kid. No crime is worth it." I realized I'd gone too far. If this guy called the police, my entire plan was dead. I had to pivot. I let my face crumple, forcing a look of pure, agonizing heartbreak. I looked down, letting a bit of bile rise in my throat to make my voice sound raspy. "Brother Lou," I sobbed, the tears coming surprisingly easy. "I won't lie to you. My wife, she ran off with another man. I just wanted to kill something. I wanted to feel like I could actually do something." Lou's face went from pale to white. He thought he'd just confirmed I was a murderer in training. "Don't do it. You're young. You can find another woman. Don't let those two ruin your life. You'll end up in prison." He spent the next 10 minutes trying to comfort me, even admitting he'd been cheated on once too. I let my crying taper off into heavy heaves. I feel better now, brother, I rasped, wiping my eyes. Talking to you had helped. I won't do anything stupid. Lou looked immensely relieved. He'd saved 2 lives and kept himself out of a police investigation. He looked like he wanted to buy me a drink just for not being a murderer. Then I looked up at him. So, can I have my 200 yuan back? Lou froze. He looked like he'd been hit with a cattle prod. For a second, I thought he might actually punch me. But he just reached into his pocket, pulled out the crumpled bills, and slapped them into my hand. Take it, he hissed. Just go home. And never come back. Thank you, brother, I said. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught a stack of bags in the corner. Pig feed. It was high protein, long-lasting, and exactly what I needed for the bunker. Can I take 2 bags of that feed? Those 2 took all my money. I'm broke. I'll probably have to eat this stuff to survive. Lou groaned, clutching his chest like he was having a heart attack. He waved me off weakly. Take it. Take whatever you want. Just leave. I hauled the bags home, dropped them off, and spent the rest of the day buying more supplies and scouting the markets. By the time I showered and changed, I was exhausted. But I had one more stop to make. I knocked on the door of the Fu family's apartment. Fu Hu opened it, his face lighting up the moment he saw me. Director Lee, please, come in, he said, ushering me inside. Have you eaten? We just finished cooking. I played the part of the polite cousin, enjoying a meal while Fu Qingdai went to her room to do homework. After dinner, I sat on the sofa with Fu Hu while his wife, Zhang Wan, started on the dishes in the kitchen. I could see her ears perking up. I took a slow sip of tea and leaned in. Old Fu, I asked about that job for you. Fu Hu leaned forward, his back tense. I sighed, putting the cup down. It's a bit more complicated than I thought. He sagged, his face falling. Wait, don't worry, I said, raising a hand. When I say complicated, I mean for you. For me, it's a small matter. But since I'm currently being considered for the deputy director position, I can't be seen directly handing out favors. We need to be careful. It might require a little bit of an investment on your part. In the kitchen, the sound of clinking dishes stopped completely. I had them exactly where I wanted them. I leaned back slightly, watching the reaction on Fu Hu's face. Director Lee, please tell me. Fu Hu asked immediately, his eyes wide with anticipation. How can I help? What do I need to do? I took a breath, playing the role of the busy executive. The director of the National Bureau is a man named Zhang Zhao. He has a son who isn't a child anymore. He's actually older than your daughter. The kid is obsessed with weapons and gear. Now, my own subordinates are being watched by my rivals within the company, so I can't move freely. I need to use the director's son as a breakthrough to secure your position. I leaned in closer, dropping my voice. I met the kid once. He loves archery. His father used to be strict, but now the boy is older and restless. He wants to play with the real stuff. I need you to prepare 3 high-end compound bows for me. I need a 50-pound, a 70-pound, and a 90-pound bow. Get as many arrows as possible for each, the heavy-duty, armor-piercing hunting type. Throw in all the accessories too, laser sights, stabilizers, rapid-fire attachments. Everything. I paused, adding a specific detail. But listen, buy a different color for each set of bows and arrows. Fu Hu looked like he'd been hit by a truck. 3 bows, armor-piercing arrows. Director Lee, that sounds like we're going to war. And a 90-pound bow? I can't even pull that back. Is all of this really necessary? I tilted my head, then snapped my gaze back to him with a look of disappointment. Old Fu, this is why you're still where you are. You're older than me, but you don't understand how the world works. I'm not giving him all of it. I need to pick and choose the best ones. Do you think gift giving is just buying the first thing you see? I need variety so I can curate the perfect set. I can't go to a weapon shop myself without being spotted. You buy everything in bulk, keep the receipts, and after I make my selection, you can just return the rest for a refund. It's basic psychology. In the kitchen, I heard the tension leave Zhang Wan's body as she resumed cleaning. Psychology. Fu Hu whispered, looking genuinely impressed. Learning from a director really is an education. I took another sip of tea. That's your part. Now for mine. The director's son is a good lead, but I've been out of the country too long. The situation here is murky. I have about a 70% chance of pulling this off. The remaining 30%? That's on you. Fuhu's expression turned solemn. He had been a soldier once, but just a regular grunt. Now he was just a civilian being dragged into a high-stakes power struggle. He looked terrified. Don't be nervous, I said smoothly. It's simple. Every time I go on an overseas mission, I leave behind 2 confidants. We have secret contact methods. I need you to go to Erdogan and buy a specific set of high-end solar panels and international communication equipment. Once you buy them, my people will see the signal. They'll know I'm back and what the situation is. After that, you just sit back and wait for your new job to start. Fuhu reached for his tea, then froze. Solar panels? Director, how much is that going to cost? A full professional set will run you about 14,000 yuan, I said calmly. 14,000. Fuhu's eyes nearly popped out of his head. That's too much. Plus the bows. I don't have that kind of money. What's the rush? I tapped the table. Buy the stuff, keep the receipts, and return it in 2 days just like the bows. Those items are just a signal for my men. They have to be specific. Don't ask questions, just get it done. I felt a pang of guilt. I had researched solar power earlier that afternoon. It was ridiculously expensive, and I didn't have the budget. But if Fuhu bought it, I could use it for the hideout. If the world didn't end, he could just return it. Fine. Fuhu said, setting his cup down firmly. When should I buy it? Tomorrow. The day after at the latest. Get everything at once. We do this one thing, and we're both set. I smiled and patted his arm. Relax, old Fu. It's all falling into place. Now, let me go check on Qingdai's lessons. Of course, Director. Thank you. Fuhu stood up and led me to her bedroom door. Inside, Fu Qingdai was sitting at her desk in white pajamas, aimlessly flipping through a workbook. Her small legs swung back and forth under the chair. When she saw us, she glanced up nervously and then looked down at her lap. Qingdai, listen to your cousin's advice. Take it to heart, Fuhu said before closing the door. The moment the latch clicked, the girl sprang up and sat on the edge of the bed. I sat in her desk chair, surrounded by stuffed animals and the faint scent of perfume. Is the soundproofing okay? I whispered. Yes, she murmured. They can't hear us if we keep it down. Did you get it? I held out my hand. Money. How much did you manage to get today? She reached under her mattress and pulled out a small wad of crumpled bills. I counted them. My face darkened. 900 yuan? And some change? What am I supposed to do with this? It's enough to buy 2 ropes to hang ourselves with, she snapped, looking distressed. Cousin, this is all I could find. I tried asking my mom for money, but she just yelled at me. She says if I want something, she'll buy it for me. I have no reason to spend money if I never leave the house. Then cry. Throw a tantrum. I hissed. Do I have to teach you everything? And if she wants to buy things, let her. Tell her to buy supplies. Use your head. Her face flushed with frustration. I told her to buy rice and crackers. She called me crazy. She bought 1 small bag of rice. What good is 1 bag? And I don't want to steal anymore. If they catch me, they'll send me back to the hospital. Qingdai, money is going to be worthless paper in a few days, I said, gesturing emphatically. I'm an outsider here. I'm working for you. If you don't steal the funds, how am I supposed to protect you? I traveled across the galaxy for this, and you're worried about your mom catching you. I stopped mid-sentence. The weight of the situation hit me, and the words died in my throat. Qingdai sat there, her head bowed. Large tears began to roll down her cheeks. She pulled her legs up, buried her face in her knees, and started to sob silently. Her shoulders shook with the effort of holding it in, but eventually, a broken cry escaped. Outside the door, I heard muffled voices. She's crying, old Fu, Zhongwan whispered. I think our daughter is crying. Should I take a fruit plate in there? No, Fu hissed back. That's the detoxification process. Don't interrupt the director's treatment. I waited until her sobs subsided. All right, I said softly. It's good to let it out, but you have to try one more time. I believe in you. Qingdai looked up, her eyes red and swollen. After tonight, there are only 2 days left. Is there really no other way? What about my grandparents? My friends? I know what's coming, but no one believes me. If only I were older, maybe they would listen. It wouldn't matter, I said, grabbing a tissue from the desk and handing it to her. Even if you were the richest person on earth, your parents would still think they know better than you. Now, blow your nose. You're about to eat it. She turned bright red and snatched the tissue, wiping her face messily. If you were in charge. She started, but she didn't finish the thought. We both knew the clock was ticking. Why would they listen to you? Qingdai asked, her voice thick with a sob. Power and money aren't the same thing. I replied, trying to distract her. If you were an official, your parents would know who the real boss is. But as a kid, you're just their daughter. My interruption worked. Her emotions stabilized, though her voice remained raspy. Cousin, what happens next? Where do we go? Are we just going to hide here forever? I went silent, thinking it over. I had considered the aftermath of the zombie outbreak, but there were no perfect plans. For now, the best move was to stay put. We knew nothing about these creatures yet. Was it a virus? A mystical force? I didn't know, but if they were biological, they couldn't live forever without food. If we hid for 2 weeks, they might just starve. In this heat, they'd probably bloat and burst before they even found us. Movies make zombies look immortal, but this was reality. Even if they didn't need to eat, Qingdai's diary suggested they were clumsy and stiff. In a modern industrial society, these things are just moving targets. Once the government's war machine starts rolling, clearing them out would be easy. This world's technology wasn't as advanced as Earth's, but they had tanks, cannons, and missiles. They even had something Earth only dreamed of, the Cold Sky missile system. It was a strategic weather weapon, capable of changing the climate on a massive scale. History said it had been used once, killing 200,000 people in an instant. With firepower like that, the zombie crisis should be easy to handle. The only real question was how long we had to hold out before help arrived. The first task is surviving the rain, I told her. I have a plan for the rest. If you're feeling overwhelmed, rest tomorrow. Don't do anything. But on the last day, I need your help. With what? I pulled a small bottle from my pocket. Sleeping pills. On the final night, grind these into a powder and put them in your parents' food. Once they're out cold, come outside at 11 o'clock. I'll need a hand setting up security measures. Qingdai nodded seriously. I understand, cousin. I smiled and handed her my phone and a pair of headphones. I like it when you're cooperative. Here, play with this. It'll help you relax. She took the phone with curiosity, sliding the headphones on as I showed her how to use it. I played some music from my world, strange, alien tunes to her. She didn't understand the lyrics, but the melody caught her. I watched her relax, leaning back on the bed, her small feet tensing and curling slightly against the sheets as she got lost in the sound. A few minutes later, the screen locked. She looked up, caught me staring at her feet, and her face turned bright red. She pulled the headphones off, looking flustered. Cousin, why are you looking at my feet? Just seeing if you look like a fast runner. I lied, looking away. I started poking through her desk drawers. I opened one and found it packed to the brim with colorful candies and chocolates. I was genuinely surprised. That's a lot of sugar. I had my mom buy it, she whispered. I thought it might be useful. I picked up a bar of chocolate and sniffed it. It smelled like the real deal. I hadn't seen any food allergies or poisonings in this world yet, and I hadn't had time to stock up on high-energy supplies. This was a lucky find. I bit off a tiny corner of a piece, a habit I'd formed since arriving. Never eat a full portion of strange food. The rich flavor spread across my tongue. I nodded, satisfied. The candy here tastes. I stopped. My eyes bulged. A wave of heat surged from my stomach to my chest, then up my neck. I could feel the blood vessels in my eyes tightening. My entire face turned a violent, dark red. Qingdai turned pale. She opened her mouth to scream, but I lunged forward, trembling, and tried to cover her mouth. My coordination was gone. My finger accidentally jammed into her throat, making her gag and push me away. I waved my hand frantically, signaling her to be quiet. I collapsed onto the bed, my muscles twitching like I was having a seizure. My heart hammered against my ribs. Veins popped out on my forehead. Poison. The chocolate was pure poison. I shoved my fingers down my throat, desperate to throw it up. Qingdai grabbed a trash can and held it for me. I struggled for 10 minutes, gasping for air, until the burning sensation finally began to recede. Cousin, are you okay? She whispered, terrified. I almost died. I wheezed. I'd been so careful since crossing over, yet I still walked right into a trap. Luckily, the reaction was as fast as it was violent. I sat up, my body still weak. "Can you not eat chocolate?" she asked. "Have you had it before?" "I have," I said, my voice hoarse. "But not your chocolate." I reached into my bag and pulled out a bar I'd brought from my own world. I scraped a bit of powder off and grabbed her hand. Before she could protest, I rubbed the powder onto her skin. Almost instantly, her skin turned bright red and started to sting. She yelped and pulled her hand back. "What are you doing? That hurts." I handed her a wet wipe. A simple experiment. It was clear now. Chocolate from my world was toxic to her, and hers was lethal to me. A simple allergy wouldn't be this fast. It was a fundamental biological rejection. If I had eaten a whole bar, I'd be a corpse right now. I stood up and headed for the door. "I'm leaving. Get some rest. Remember, come out the night after tomorrow." "I will," she promised. I hurried past her parents, muttered a few words of goodbye, and ran back to my place. The moment I got inside, I mixed 2 glasses of salt water and forced them down. I spent the next hour hovering over the toilet, purging my system until there was nothing left but bile. I slumped against the bathroom wall, exhausted, trying to catch my breath. I tried to stand up, but my feet slipped on the floor. I crashed back down, landing hard on my backside. My eyes were stinging, filled with tears forced out by the violence of the vomiting. I wiped my face, feeling a wave of bitter exhaustion wash over me. I almost died because of a piece of chocolate. How did my life come to this? It didn't feel like living. It felt like having a knife pressed against my throat every single second. But time was running out. I couldn't afford to rest yet. I waited an hour to make sure the reaction had fully passed, then dragged my aching body downstairs. The grain store delivery was supposed to arrive soon. I stood at the entrance of the residential complex for 15 minutes until a small truck slowly pulled up. I waved my arms, guiding the driver to the front of my building. 2 men hopped out and started unloading. I had asked them to pack everything, the rice, the flour, the oil, into plain cardboard boxes. You couldn't tell what was inside. One of the workers grunted as he lifted a heavy crate. "Boss, I've never seen anyone buy grain like this. Sealed tight and delivered in the middle of the night. Is there some kind of special reason?" I forced a weary smile. "Nothing special. My company does charity work. Our warehouse got flooded, and this batch is for underprivileged children. We pack them like this so we can put labels on them easily. I work during the day, so night is the only time I have to get this done." The worker's expression softened into one of respect. "That's noble of you. Tell you what, we'll waive the delivery fee this time. Consider it a small donation from us." They started moving faster, their energy renewed by the lie. 10 minutes later, the truck was empty. "All set, boss. We're heading out." "Wait," I called out. They stopped and looked back. "Something else." I hesitated for a second. "It's nothing big, but I heard there was a chemical leak at the factory in the city. The pollution is high up in the air. It won't hurt you normally, but if it rains, stay inside. Don't touch the rainwater. Don't even use the tap water if you can help it. It's carcinogenic. Seriously, the news hasn't reported it yet, but be careful." "Thanks for the tip, boss," they shouted, waving as they drove away. There were only 2 days left until the end of the world. I spent the night in a state of half-sleep, waking up with bloodshot eyes and a face so haggard I couldn't hide the fatigue. I didn't even wash my face or brush my teeth. I grabbed my notebook and headed out to finish the final round of shopping. I didn't stop moving until dusk. Back at the apartment, I went to work. I used heavy-duty tape to seal every gap in the windows on the 4th floor. I pulled the curtains tight. On the 5th floor, I built a small makeshift awning over the window to keep rain from splashing against the glass. I lined the edges of the windowsills with thin sheets of metal and coated them in a thick layer of industrial grease. I had already installed security bars on the lower floors. If the monsters tried to climb the walls, they wouldn't find a single handhold. They'd slip and fall long before they reached me. Once the apartment was a fortress, I knocked on old Fu's door. Fu opened it, his face as welcoming as ever. "Director Lee, is everything ready?" My voice was low, heavy with exhaustion. I tried to smile, but my facial muscles were too stiff to move. Sensing the tension, Fu licked his lips nervously. It's all ready. Come in and see." Inside, 3 compound bows sat on the table, next to over 100 arrows and various accessories. The solar panels, batteries, and inverters were all there too. Seeing the gear made my heart settle slightly. I nodded. Good. Keep these here for now. I'm heading out the day after tomorrow to settle our business. Director, is something wrong? Fuhu asked cautiously. I shook my head. No. I just got word that one of my patients passed away. I can't treat Qingdai for the next 2 days. I'll be back the day after tomorrow. The next night, I did a final inventory. Every bucket was filled with fresh water. I sat at the dining table, my skin stinging from how hard I'd scrubbed myself in the shower. I stared blankly at a cage on the table. Inside, 20 rats scurried around, frantically trying to find a way out. I felt just like them, trapped in a world that was about to end, struggling just to survive. Was I prepared enough? Could I actually make it through this? I looked at the clock on the wall. It was exactly 11 o'clock. Once tonight passed, the apocalypse would begin. I stepped out of my door just as Qingdai emerged from hers. We stood in the hallway, eyes meeting in the dim light. Are your parents asleep? I whispered. She gave a small, shaky nod. I doubled the dose of their medicine. They're out cold. I filled 2 buckets with water and shut off the main valve. Her face was pale, her eyes brimming with tears she was fighting to hold back. Her whole body was trembling. I reached out and pulled her into a hug. Don't be afraid. I'm here. I stroked her hair, feeling a surge of pity. She was just a girl, and she had been so strong. I wasn't sure if I was saving her, or if she was the one saving me. We don't have much time. Let's move. I pulled out a small box. What's that? She asked. What are we doing? I didn't answer right away. I opened the box to reveal tubes of high-strength industrial adhesive and a stack of printed papers. We're sealing the doors, I said quietly. Starting from the first floor, we're going to fill every neighbor's keyhole and door latch with glue. If people turn into those things, they'll be trapped inside their own homes. It's the only way to keep us safe. Qingdai's eyes widened. But what if they don't turn? They'll be trapped. What if they run out of water or starve? I held up the papers. These are fake community notices about the water pollution. We'll slide them under the doors. I have the solvent to dissolve the glue later. We'll watch how things go, and if it's safe, we'll let them out. Most people have enough food and water for a few days. Helping them helps us, but we can't save everyone. This is the best I can do for them. The rest is up to fate. Qingdai took a deep breath and nodded. I understand. Let's go. We headed down to the first floor. I checked the windows. It was an era before people stayed up all night on the internet. Most people were in bed by 10. The building was silent and dark. We moved quickly, injecting glue and sliding notices. The glue was strange. It smelled like the stuff from my world, but was 10 times stronger. Either this world made better products, or my old world was just cheap. We hit every door except for my supply rooms and the Fu family's apartment. When we finished, we hurried back to the 5th floor. Qingdai looked at the rows of long, foam-wrapped objects lining the floor. What are these? Steel pipes, I said. Glue isn't enough. If someone tries to break a door down, we need to brace it. I've already got them sorted by size. Help me carry these steel pipes down, I told Qingdai. We're going to build a support frame on every floor to block the doors of the facing units. I picked up a heavy pipe and pointed to a pile of wooden slats on the floor. Grab those. I haven't wrapped them in foam yet, so be careful. Don't make a sound. If we wake anyone up, things will get messy. My plan was simple but brutal. Once the doors were braced and the gaps filled with wood, I would lock the main entrance to the building and shut off the main water valve. After that, all we could do was wait. Qingdai nodded silently. We moved through the building like ghosts, working on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 6th floors. We glued the locks and then jammed the doors shut with the steel frames. Unless someone decided to jump out a window, they were trapped. If they turned into monsters, they'd rot inside their own apartments. It felt cold, but it eliminated the threat of desperate neighbors and gave us total control over the building's survival. Back in my apartment, Qingdai sat exhausted in a chair while I busied myself sorting supplies. I crouched on the floor, sliding items across the table toward her. These are vitamins, I muttered, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. Take one every day, and this is powdered milk. 1 cup in the morning, 1 at night. I didn't stop there. Take these vegetables too. Tell your parents to eat the perishables first. The power grid won't fail immediately, but it won't last more than a few days. When you have free time, exercise. You need to be strong enough to pull a 50-pound bow. And take these extra bottles of glue. Wait until your parents are asleep, then seal every window in your house. Don't let them open them for anything. Qingdai quietly gathered the items. I sat down next to her, looking her in the eye. Qingdai, your parents can't be allowed to wander off. Once you go home, I'm going to seal your front door from the outside. Take my house keys. And listen to me, do not tell anyone about the supplies on the 4th floor. Not even your parents. I wasn't going to show you, but I did because I trust you. Everything there is for you. You have to learn to survive. For now, don't trust anyone but me. She nodded, grabbed her things, and followed me to her door. As I set her supplies down, she suddenly turned and threw herself into my arms. She sobbed into my chest, a muffled, heavy sound that broke the silence of the hallway. I held her, neither of us saying a word. By 2 a.m., I was back in my living room, sitting upright in a chair with my silver spear across my lap. I wiped the blade over and over, my eyes fixed on the window. Outside, the night was a deep, suffocating abyss. Today was the day the world ended. Neither of us knew exactly when the rain would start. It could be tonight, or it could be at dawn. Either way, I wasn't going to sleep. The clock ticked. Click, click. 3:15 a.m. Suddenly, a jagged streak of purple lightning tore through the sky. The flash reflected off my spear, stinging my eyes. I stood up instantly. A roar of thunder shook the building, rolling through the clouds like a physical weight. My skin crawled. Then came the sound, a heavy, rhythmic drumming against the glass. The rain had arrived. The apocalypse was here. Weather reports had predicted a dry week, but the sky had lied. I watched the downpour and felt a sharp pang in my chest. This world had been so full of potential. People were hardworking, the culture was honest, and in a few decades, they might have reached the same digital age I came from. Now it was all over. I closed my eyes, took a long breath, and went back to cleaning my spear. The repetitive motion was the only thing keeping my fear at bay. The night passed slowly. When the sun finally rose, the world wasn't bright. It was draped in a suffocating, leaden gray. I dragged my heavy legs to the window and stared out, my mouth dropping open in shock. The rain wasn't just heavy, it was dark. The water falling from the sky looked like liquid gray sand. When it hit the ground, it swirled like a thick, toxic mist. Wait, if the rain was visibly gray, people would stay inside. That was good news, right? I ran to the door and pounded on the wall connecting to Qingdai's unit. Qingdai, are you there? Brother? I'm here, she shouted back, her voice trembling. She had clearly been awake all night too. What's wrong? Did you see the rain? I asked. Yes. What? What color is it? There was a pause. It looks normal to me. Just rain. Is there something wrong with it? My heart sank. Nothing. Just be careful. Don't touch a single drop. I walked back to my chair, feeling hollow. The rain was bright gray to me, a clear warning sign. But to everyone else, it looked like ordinary water. The company, or perhaps the mask I wore, was giving me a perspective no one else had. It meant the world wouldn't take precautions. The disaster would be total. I looked at the cage of rats on my table. They were quiet now, huddled together, oblivious to the change in the atmosphere. I had caught them for experiments. I needed to know how the virus affected animals and how long the infected stayed alive. I leaned back and let out a bitter, self-mocking laugh. I was a sales guy back home. I studied liberal arts. Now here I was, setting up biological control groups for the end of the world. I picked up my binoculars and looked outside. Despite the downpour, people were already heading to work. I saw a man in a raincoat and another under an umbrella. As the gray drops hit them, the water didn't splash. It seemed to vanish into their skin. I had to know for sure. I opened my window just a crack and extended a long-handled ladle. I caught a small amount of the gray liquid and pulled it back inside. I moved to the kitchen, putting on multiple face masks and my motorcycle helmet for protection. I turned on the stove and the exhaust fan, then carefully began to heat the gray water. I needed to see what this stuff really was. In less than a minute, the thin layer of water in the pot boiled and evaporated. But the gray mist didn't rise with the steam. Instead, it settled at the bottom like heavy smoke. When I moved the pot, The mist swirled and rippled. I stared at it, my mind racing. I had no idea what this substance was, and honestly, I wasn't sure it could even be called matter in the traditional sense. What I did know was terrifying. It didn't rely entirely on water to exist. High heat didn't destroy it. It could be held in a container, and it still responded to gravity. I stepped out of the kitchen and grabbed a fresh ladle and 2 glass canning jars. I filled the ladle with a little clean water and carefully poured it into the pot containing the gray mist. I let out a breath of relief when the mist dissolved back into the liquid. That gaseous state was too dangerous. It could spread through the air far too easily. It felt safer, or at least more controllable, in the water. I divided the gray mixture into the 2 jars and wrapped the lids tightly with plastic wrap to ensure a perfect seal. I placed one jar on the balcony in direct sunlight and the other in a dark, cool corner. Once I finished, a wave of exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. I checked my security measures one last time, making sure I hadn't missed a single detail. Then, I went back to the bedroom and collapsed onto the bed. I lay there sideways, watching the rain lash against the window. I hadn't slept all night, and my mind was a storm of thoughts. I needed to rest. If an emergency happened, I couldn't afford to be slow or delirious. From the apartments above and below, I could hear muffled shouting and cursing. I wondered how far this rain reached. I hoped there were places where the sky was still clear, where people might realize what was happening and send help. I was drifting off when a sound jerked me awake. I had 2 radios on my nightstand. Both were basic models, but one was set to FM and the other to AM. The FM radio was emitting a low-frequency static hum. Then, a voice broke through. "This is the Central Broadcasting Station." I sat up, my head throbbing. I grabbed the radio and squinted through the stinging pain in my eyes, fumbling with the tuning knob. After a few turns, the voice became clear. According to the latest bulletin from the Meteorological Bureau and the Global Environmental Monitoring Center, an abnormal rainfall event has begun globally as of early this morning. Preliminary assessments suggest the scope is worldwide. The duration and specific causes are currently under investigation. The scientific community is launching an urgent inquiry. There are no definitive conclusions at this time. The announcer's voice remained calm, almost robotic. Citizens are advised to stay tuned to official channels. To ensure personal safety, please use windproof and waterproof gear when outdoors. Ensure all food and water sources are sealed. We will provide updates via radio and internet platforms. Please remain calm. Do not spread rumors. I clutched my head. The pain felt like needles stabbing into my brain. It was global. There was nowhere to run. I forced myself to grab my phone. I had set an alarm before trying to sleep, but not even 2 hours had passed. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, letting the reality sink in. Then, I stood up and walked to the living room window. The faint cursing from the neighbors continued. I looked down at the street and felt a small sense of relief. No one had come to seal the building yet. People inside would eventually call for help, but for now, the panic hadn't peaked. I had a window of time. Most of the residents in this building were retirees. On a rainy day like this, they wouldn't choose to go out anyway. The younger ones who had to work would likely call in sick once they saw the intensity of the storm. As for emergency services, I hoped my fake contaminated water flyers would do their job. People are naturally suspicious. If you tell someone you spat in their cup, they won't drink from it, even if they think you're lying. They'd rather be safe than sorry. With the official radio broadcasts now confirming the abnormality of the rain, people would be even more hesitant to step outside. Even if the fire department showed up to evacuate the building, I wasn't worried. I had a gun. I was prepared to use force if I had to. Delaying them wouldn't be a problem. I picked up my binoculars and scanned the distant streets. My brow furrowed. Aside from a few stray cars, there were only 3 pedestrians. 2 wore raincoats, and 1 held an umbrella. Suddenly, the one with the umbrella dropped it. All 3 were moving with a slow, jerky gait. It wasn't how people walked in the rain. They were changing. The transformation had already begun. I swallowed hard and turned the binoculars toward the opposite apartment building. Most families hadn't drawn their curtains. I saw people moving normally in the first 2 units I checked. But in the third, on the 5th floor, I saw him. A shirtless man with a large belly stood perfectly still by the window. His skin was a sickly, bruised green. His body swayed slightly, but his face was completely devoid of life or expression. I lowered the binoculars and pulled my curtains shut. It had only been a few hours, and the infection was already taking hold. The tap water was definitely compromised. I headed back to the kitchen and collected a small sample of gray rainwater from the window. Then, I went to the bathroom and grabbed a heavy wire cage I had prepared. I had divided it into two sections. One side was a standard cage, and the other had a hamster wheel. I needed to understand these creatures if I was going to survive. Using tongs, I moved 2 rats into the separate sections of the cage. I put on thick gloves, took a glass dropper, and sucked up some of the gray water. I carefully squeezed the same amount of liquid onto each rat. While waiting for a reaction, I pulled a toy 4-wheel drive car out of my bag and started taking it apart. The technology in this world was almost identical to my own. I used to love these toys as a kid, so I knew exactly how to strip the motor. I connected the motor to the axle of the hamster wheel and wired it up. It was a makeshift treadmill to test the stamina of an infected subject. Half an hour passed. The rats showed no change. I picked up the dropper and added a double dose to one of the rats. 10 minutes later, that rat changed. Its natural instinct to sniff around and hide vanished. Its physical appearance didn't change much, but its behavior was unrecognizable. It lunged at the bars with a terrifying intensity, desperate to get to me. The heavy wire was too thick for it to bite through, but it didn't stop trying. I stood up and backed away, my heart hammering. As I moved to the side, the rat immediately shifted its position, its eyes following me with mindless, predatory hunger. The experiment was a success. The nightmare was real. I gripped my silver spear, eyes locked on the cage. I had to be ready for anything. The mutated rat was clearly obsessed with living prey, but something felt off. There was another rat right next to it in the split cage, yet the monster kept staring only at me. I needed to know why. I pulled out my phone, set it to record right in front of the cage, and walked back into the bedroom. 2 minutes later, I checked the footage. The second I vanished from its sight, the mutated rat instantly pivoted. It lunged at the normal rat in the other compartment with terrifying speed. I had my first set of conclusions. These things were hyper-aggressive toward living beings and prioritized larger targets first. It seemed they relied mostly on vision, but I couldn't be sure about sound or smell yet. I was just about to start the next test when 2 lines of glowing text flickered in the air before my eyes. New sample detected. Available for recovery. The company will provide equivalent compensation. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs, finally slowed down. The company was still there. They were still watching, still able to help me. The text faded, leaving me in silence. How do I send it? I shouted into the empty room. Give me some details. I don't understand how this works. Can someone just talk to me? No one answered. I grabbed my hair and took deep breaths, trying to calm down. I should have known. This damn company never gave clear instructions, but they wanted the sample now. I couldn't exactly wait until the mission was over to turn it in. My eyes landed on the briefcase sitting on the sofa. Ding! A light bulb went off in my head. I lunged for it. This thing had its own pocket dimension. If I put the sample inside, maybe the company would receive it. I licked my lips, my hands shaking with excitement. I reached into the bag and pulled out a long, sharpened screwdriver. I didn't hesitate. I jammed it through the bars, stabbing the mutated rat until it stopped moving. Even in death, the thing was unervingly resilient. I used the tool to poke at it for a while, making sure it was truly dead before I carefully fished it out and double-bagged it in plastic. I shoved the bundle into the briefcase. I held my breath, waiting. A second later, a new prompt flashed in front of me. Recovery successful. Equivalent item exchanged. Yes, the company was blunt and mysterious, but their efficiency was top tier. I reached back into the bag, my fingers brushing against something solid. I pulled out a small black paper box. I felt a surge of nervous energy. So far, the company had given me a mask that translated languages, a briefcase with infinite space, and a handgun that seemingly never ran out of bullets. Whatever was in this box had to be incredible. I took a deep breath, opened the lid, and saw something metallic and silver. It was sleek, made of rounded titanium alloy, and shaped with smooth, aerodynamic curves. My smile slowly faded. My hand trembled as I lifted the object out to get a better look. 2 seconds later, I lost it. I slammed the box onto the floor in a fit of rage. "Are you kidding me?" I screamed. "What the hell is this?" I was holding a medical suppository. A metal plug. The world was ending. I was surrounded by monsters, and the company sent me a toy for my backside? I felt a wave of cold despair wash over me. I shouldn't have gone out drinking with those clients back in my old life. If I hadn't, I wouldn't be stuck with a company that didn't care if I lived or died. As I wallowed in self-pity, I noticed a small card that had fallen out of the box. It looked like an instruction manual. I picked it up, hoping there was some massive misunderstanding. Asterisk emergency medical plug. Built-in emergency fluid. Automatically releases medicine if a drop in body temperature is detected. Can be used multiple times until fluid is depleted. A burning sensation is normal. Do not panic. If entering a dangerous area, insert in advance to prevent life-threatening delays. Do not force open the shell. For internal use only. High risk of poisoning if taken orally. Asterisk. You couldn't just give me a pill? I yelled, throwing the manual down. It was a high-speed delivery system. By bypassing the liver and absorbing directly through the membranes, the medicine worked faster and more reliably than an injection. But the delivery method was still humiliating. After 10 minutes of fuming, I found some nylon rope, tied the device to it, and looped it around my waist. I wasn't going to use it unless I absolutely had to, but I couldn't afford to throw away a literal lifesaver. I went back to work. I needed more data. I infected 2 more rats. The one in the hamster wheel had already turned. It was trying to sprint toward me, but because it was in the wheel, it just ended up running in place at a frantic pace. I opened my notebook. The gray substance in the rain was definitely the source. Infection speed was directly tied to the amount of exposure. The infection rate was nearly 100%. However, the mutated rats showed a slight decrease in coordination. They were stiff and couldn't run as fast as before, but they were tireless. They felt no pain. I put fresh batteries into the toy car motor and flipped the switch. The wheel spun faster. The mutated rat couldn't keep up and started tumbling inside the cage, yet it kept trying to adjust its body to attack me. I burned through 5 sets of batteries. The results were terrifying. The rat showed 0 signs of exhaustion. If anything, it seemed to be getting stronger as it adapted to its new body. Over the next hour, I put the creatures through hell. I tried suffocating them, drowning them, and burning them. Even when a rat was charred to a crisp, it still twitched. They were incredibly hard to kill. Only a direct hit to the torso, specifically what I assumed was the heart, caused rapid death. Even cutting off the head didn't stop them instantly. I sat back, my heart heavy. I still didn't know how long they could survive without food, or if they could infect each other. But one thing was clear. The world was about to become a slaughterhouse. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. I picked up the wire cage by its cord and lowered it into the glass fish tank I'd bought earlier. After securing the wooden lid on top, I stumbled back into the bedroom and collapsed. In the pitch black, the radio I'd tuned to the AM frequency suddenly crackled to life. I forced my heavy eyelids open and scrambled to adjust the dial. Most people used FM for local entertainment, but AM was built for long-distance, emergency broadcasts. It was the gold standard for communication during a catastrophe. Even though this wasn't Earth, the laws of physics were the same. I'd done my homework. The radio hissed, and then a voice broke through the static. It was clear and authoritative. It was the National Disaster Emergency Command Center. "Citizens, please pay close attention," the voice began. As of 1 p.m. today, most regions have been affected by an unknown type of rainfall. This rain carries potential biological hazards. It can cause irreversible damage through skin contact, inhalation, or ingestion. We have confirmed multiple cases of mass loss of control linked to this rain. Individuals are exhibiting abnormal, violent behavior. The broadcast then listed 3 direct orders. Do not touch the rain. Drink only sealed, bottled water. Seal all doors, windows, and vents immediately to keep out external moisture. These orders are effective immediately, the voice continued. Anyone who refuses to comply will be treated as a threat to public safety. Updates will follow via radio and internet. I let out a long, shaky breath. My spirit lifted slightly. The government was moving. They finally realized how dire the situation was, and had issued direct survival guidelines. Things were bad, but at least the machine of the state was turning. 5 days passed in a blur. The rain was still falling, but it had slowed to a drizzle. It looked like it might stop soon. I stood by the window, my face pale and gaunt. I looked like I'd been through a long illness. 5 days of high-pressure survival and fragmented sleep had left me a shell of myself. Below my window, the number of monsters, the zombies, had grown to nearly 20. I'd learned a few things over those days. The gray substance I'd collected in the jars had eventually dissipated. After 5 days, the water was no longer infectious. This was a massive revelation. It meant the dreams the Tiandao company gave Qingdai weren't a perfect prophecy. They were a prediction, a simulation pushed into her mind. The reality was actually slightly less dire than her nightmares. The disaster was widespread, yes, but the virus itself seemed to have a shelf life. But the horror outside was very real. In the building across from mine, I watched several tragedies unfold. I saw a man driven to jump from his balcony after his family turned. He was torn apart by the pack below before he even stopped breathing. I saw others fight back successfully, only to end their own lives in despair. The sound of crying from the floors above and below me never stopped. It was a constant, rhythmic assault on my sanity. My only hope was for the rain to stop so the military could move in. I just needed the turning point to arrive. But one thing terrified me. Since that first emergency broadcast, the radio had gone silent. No updates. No words of comfort. The entire country had fallen into a deathly hush. It was 5 p.m. The sky was unnaturally dark under the gray clouds. I lay on my bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, listening to the occasional roar and the sound of claws scratching at doors in the hallway. Suddenly, the radio chirped. The static sounded like heaven to my ears. I bolted upright and cranked the volume to the max, leaning in with desperate hope. A voice came through, distorted, panicked, and filled with grief. Citizens, the government has terminated. You are on your own. Fight for yourselves. Do not believe. A blood-curdling scream cut the broadcast short. Silence followed. My face froze. My mind went completely blank. Every sound in the world seemed to vanish for a heartbeat. Then, the air raid sirens began to wail. It was a piercing, jagged sound that seemed to tear the sky open. I ran to the living room, my legs shaking so hard I could barely stand. When I looked out the window, my pupils dilated in terror. Far off in the distance, toward the heart of the city, 10 streaks of white flame cut through the clouds. Missiles. They arched across the sky like falling stars moving in reverse. When they hit, there was no sound at first, just a massive, blinding shockwave. The clouds at the impact site began to churn and grow, rolling outward like a dark tsunami. Boom. The sound hit like a sledgehammer against the sky. My entire building shuddered, swaying as if it were being pulled upward. The windows groaned, the glass rattling violently in their frames. The world felt like it had crashed. This wasn't just the rain anymore. This was a man-made apocalypse. The clouds began to swirl violently, lightning dancing within the dark masses. Downbursts of freezing air slammed into the earth, creating pillars of ice and wind that leveled everything they touched. My teeth chattered as I gripped the windowsill. I recognized the signature of that attack. The Cryo-Sky missile system. It was a climate-altering weapon, the country's ultimate deterrent. They had just fired it at their own capital. Am I going to die? I whispered. Why? The rain was supposed to stop. The army was supposed to come. A wave of nausea hit me so hard, I doubled over. I scrambled toward the bathroom, but I didn't make it. I retched right there on the living room floor, coughing up bitter bile until tears stung my eyes. My heart felt crushed. How could a modern, industrial nation collapse this quickly? The core logic of a state is to maintain order. To announce their own demise only invites total chaos, looting, and mutiny. Even if the infection was widespread, why destroy the capital? Why was there no sign of the military? If a whole nation was this fragile, what chance did I have? My plans, my preparations, they all felt like thin sheets of paper in a hurricane. Maybe the leadership had turned. Maybe they didn't understand the virus. I couldn't think straight anymore. My mind was a mess of static. I stood there, frozen and trembling, before I finally crawled back into the bedroom, hiding from the light of the dying world outside. I grabbed one of the radios and shook it, screaming at the static. Don't believe what? Don't believe what? Talk to me. My voice cracked with desperation. A second later, I slammed the radio against the floor, shattering it into 1,000 plastic shards. Deep down, I already knew. The Tiandao Company had already passed judgment on this world. There was no need for more questions. But I realized then that I had been living a lie. I had been nursing a secret hope that the army would come, that some higher power would save us. I was a fool. I had played my cards, and the board had collapsed. I was trapped in this concrete box, and the only thing left was the bloody reality outside. The storm continued to batter the city center, but the freezing wind had already claimed the streets below. Dark clouds choked the sky. Then, a sharp, piercing wail cut through the howling wind. I stumbled to the living room window and looked out. My breath hitched. In the building across from mine, a figure stood on the edge of a window frame. They screamed once and jumped. Then, in another building to the side, someone else followed. The sound of their wailing felt like a summons from the god of death. One after another, people began to leap. I watched, paralyzed, until I saw a woman on the 6th floor of the opposite building. She was holding a child, or maybe just a bundle of clothes. I couldn't tell. She stood on the ledge, looking straight at me. She shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her face, and then she stepped off. No, no, no. Don't do it. Don't jump. I roared, jumping up and down, pounding on the glass. I saw a pack of those things, the infected, rushing toward where they would land. I couldn't think. I couldn't just watch. I ripped the window open, pulled my pistol, and started firing. Asterisk bang, 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 asterisk. I emptied the clip into the street. The slide locked back, but I kept pulling the trigger. Asterisk click, 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 asterisk. I watched mechanically as the crowd of monsters tore the mother and child to pieces. In seconds, all that was left was a red stain spreading through the rising floodwaters. They say when you see someone get an injection, you feel a phantom pain in your own skin. Standing there in that freezing wind, watching that slaughter, I felt a physical ache I had never known. It was the weight of a world dying in front of my eyes. My finger finally stopped twitching on the trigger. My stomach cramped violently. A metallic, rusty taste filled my throat. I leaned over, retching, but nothing came out. I stood in the silence for 2 seconds, then spun around and hurled the empty gun against the wall. Where is the company? I fell to my knees, screaming at the empty air. What am I supposed to do? I'm just a normal guy. Why did you pick me? I can't even save my own life. So who am I supposed to save? Why aren't you doing anything? I came here to work. What do you want from me? I punched the floor until my knuckles were raw and bleeding. I kept hitting the ground, but my strength was fading with every strike. Finally, I just leaned against the wall, covered my face, and sobbed. The sound eventually dissolved into a pathetic whimper. Hope was dead. Outside, the suicides continued, and the wind carried the sound of grief across the city. In the apartment next door, the atmosphere was just as grim. Fu, who was dizzy and exhausted, dragging his wife, Zhang Wan, toward the bedroom. Ever since they received that final emergency text, they had lost their minds. Seeing the people jumping from the windows had been the final straw. Zhang Wan had fainted from pure terror. Qing Dai stood by the door, her face deathly pale. She gripped the doorframe so hard her knuckles were white. She didn't dare look out the window. Even the sounds from outside made her legs shake. Qing Dai, Fu Hu called out, looking back. Get some water. Quickly. Qing Dai obeyed, her heart pounding. She scooped a bowl of water from the bucket and brought it to the bedroom. Seeing her father frantically trying to wake her mother, her fear turned into a desperate resolve. She quietly backed out and shut the bedroom door. She scanned the living room, her eyes landing on the front door. She grabbed a heavy chair, gritted her teeth, and smashed it against the door handle. Qing Dai, what are you doing? Fu Hu shouted from the bedroom. She didn't answer. She swung again. She missed once, her hand slamming into the metal handle. The skin tore, and blood began to flow down her fingers, but she didn't stop. After a few more hits, the lock rattled loose. Fu Hu rushed out of the bedroom, his eyes wide with anger. What do you think you're doing? I'm going out, she said. You are not going anywhere. Stay here. Look at your mother. Don't make things worse. Qing Dai just nodded, waiting. As soon as her father turned his back to head back to the bedroom, she lunged for the handle. The lock clicked, and she pulled the door open just a crack. A thick, acrid smell of cigarette smoke drifted in immediately. The hallway lights were flickering wildly. The power grid was on the verge of total collapse. She slipped out and made her way to my door. She wanted to speak, but the words died in her throat when she saw me. The room was dim. I was sitting on a stool, my shirt off, my back glistening with sweat despite the cold. My fists were wrapped in thick bandages, but the white cloth was already soaked through with dark blood. In the flickering light, the muscles of my shoulders and back looked like they were carved from stone, edged in a faint gold glow. I looked up at her, and she flinched. She pulled her arms tight across her chest. She had never seen me look like this. My eyes weren't human anymore. They were full of hatred, rage, and the raw instinct of a cornered beast. "Brother," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm scared." The lights flickered one last time and died. The only light left was the glowing red tip of my cigarette. I pressed the cherry into the table, extinguishing it. The harsh sound of me sharpening a blade stopped abruptly. "Don't be afraid," I said into the darkness. "I'm here." The wind and snow howled all night. By the next morning, the rain had stopped. I woke up feeling strangely calm. The mental breakdown from the night before had acted like a pressure valve, leaving my mind sharp and clear. I looked at the window. The government had collapsed, the missiles had dropped the temperature to lethal levels, and the military was gone. There was no one left to call. It was just us now. The temperature in the room was hovering near -50 degrees. Every breath I took came out as a thick cloud of white mist. I climbed out from under my pile of blankets, shivering despite my heavy down jacket. I knelt by the bed and checked the rat cages I had insulated with foam and old clothes. The candles I'd used for heat had burned out, but I heard a faint rustle. The rats were still alive. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The source of the infection was still a mystery, and if these test subjects froze to death, I'd lose my only lead. I had barely survived the night myself. If I hadn't set up those alcohol stoves surrounded by bricks to trap the heat, I would have woken up with frostbite, if I woke up at all. I knew Qingdai and her parents were probably fine. They had plenty of blankets and gas canisters for heat. As for the other people in the building, they had the tools to survive the cold if they were smart enough to use them. I checked my water bucket. It was a solid block of ice. I scooped a few spoonfuls of lard for a quick, high-calorie breakfast and headed out. I knocked on the Fu family's door. Qingdai opened it almost instantly, her face white from the cold. Behind her, Fu, who looked broken, his eyes hollow. When he saw me, he gasped. "Shaoli, let's talk inside," I interrupted, stepping past him into the mess of their apartment. The living room was a mess. In the center of the floor sat a pile of gray ash, the remains of a bonfire. They had ripped their sofa apart to use as fuel. It was clear this family had spent the entire night huddled here, shivering in the dark. I looked around the room, then fixed my gaze on Fu Hu. I didn't waste time with small talk. "The security door at my place is mine," I said firmly. Fu Hu looked confused. "What? You?" "Let me finish," I interrupted, my voice dropping into a serious, professional tone. "It's time for a proper introduction. My name is Li Haoqing. I'm the director of the National Critical Risk Intervention Bureau." Fu Hu let out a miserable sigh. I know who you are." I shook my head. "You know the man, but you have no idea what my bureau actually does. It's not what I told you before. We are a specialized department that studies supernatural forces. We're small, hidden, and mostly ignored by the other branches of government." I leaned in closer, making sure he was hanging on every word. 30 years ago, the government unearthed artifacts in the Northwest that were 2,000 years old. We identified them as remnants of the Mayan civilization. I don't know if they were aliens or just possessed special abilities, but we deciphered their stone tablets. They predicted the flow of history with terrifying accuracy, including this disaster. My department was created specifically to study these prophecies. Qingdai and Fu Hu froze. Their eyes were wide, their breath hitching in the cold air. "At first, the state took us seriously," I continued. "But after 30 years of nothing happening, we were forgotten. Even within the government, our existence is a secret. Most people think the Mayan prophecies are a joke. But I knew better." "What are you even talking about?" Fu stammered, his voice trembling. I don't understand. Are you okay? My mind is perfectly clear, I said coldly. According to the Mayan prophecies, a savior would emerge who could foresee this catastrophe. I followed that lead, and it brought me straight to your daughter. I lied to you before. I was in contact with Qingdai long before I moved into this building. To put it simply, your daughter is the savior from the prophecy. I am certain of it. You've seen the disaster with your own eyes. Deep down, you know I'm telling the truth. Fu rubbed his forehead, his face twisted in pain. It was too much for him to process. Yesterday, his world had ended. Now, a government agent was telling him his daughter was a messiah. You mean, you knew this would happen? Fu's voice rose with a hint of buried anger. Instead of telling the state, you came here to put all the hope on my daughter? I stayed calm. The state already knew. Do you think me saying it again would have changed anything? Why do you think I told you to buy bows, arrows, and batteries? You think I wanted to hide here? I didn't have a choice. Those bastards in charge wouldn't even give me a budget. That last shout seemed to stun him. The idea of a government department being so broke it couldn't function felt grounded and real to him. What's the situation with the country now? Fu asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The state can't be relied on anymore, I said, crushing that hope instantly. It's just us now. His face went gray. He looked back at his daughter, his heart clearly breaking. Old Fu, I said, you're an ex-soldier. You know weapons. You saw the cold sky missiles hit the city. How long do you think it'll take for the temperature to rise again? He waved a weak hand. I don't know. Maybe a week? It's summer, so maybe less. A week. I calculated the time in my head. The missiles had bought me a 7-day buffer. The freezing cold had slowed the zombies down significantly. Whether indoors or out, I estimated I had 3 days to clear the zombies from this complex and gather supplies and people. Director Lee, Fu said, his voice weak and defeated. Please leave. I don't know what you're planning, but I don't want to be involved. My wife is still unconscious. I heard the broadcasts. I believe the country won't collapse so easily. I'm going to wait for rescue. Old Fu, I barked. Stop dreaming. If the state was coming, we would have seen the army by now. Would they be firing missiles into their own cities if they had control? Even if the military is still out there, do you think they're coming for you? You're just an ordinary citizen. Why would they prioritize you? How long can you survive waiting? We got lucky the missiles didn't hit our heads this time. What if the next wave levels the whole block? Then what do you want me to do? Fu screamed, finally breaking. Get out of my house. Don't drag my daughter into your madness. Qingdai grabbed her father's sleeve, looking terrified. I stepped forward and grabbed Fu by the shoulders, staring into his eyes. If there is no state, we build one. If there is no army, we form one. We don't hide anymore. We fight those bastards. Everyone in this complex knows your daughter was sent to a mental hospital because she saw the end of the world. We use that. Qingdai is the only hope these people have. She can be their leader, their icon. I won't let you waste her potential while you wait to die. Fu stared at me, completely stunned. The world was rotting, and here I was talking about building an army and using his daughter as a figurehead. Old Fu, I know you want to protect her, I said, my voice turning icy. But following you is a death sentence. I've grown fond of Qingdai, but if you won't listen, I'd rather give her a quick end myself than watch the zombies tear her apart. I pulled out my silver pistol and aimed it directly at Qingdai. There's no time to think, I snapped. Do you want to stay here and die, or do you want to work with me? Give me an answer. Qingdai stared down the barrel of the gun. She swallowed hard, closed her eyes, and leaned her forehead right against the muzzle. Stop. I'll do it. Fu screamed, reaching out. I'll do whatever you say. I stepped back and holstered the gun. Fu immediately pulled his daughter behind him, shielding her with his body while watching me like a cornered animal. I sighed. Old Fu, I don't want to hurt you, but we have no other choice. You don't realize how dangerous this is, so I had to wake you up. Now that you've agreed, I'll protect your daughter with my life. I need you to do the same. I sat down on a piece of the sofa that was still intact. Your wife is in shock, and she won't recover in this cold. I have honeycomb coal and a stove stockpiled on the 4th floor. There's iron and wood there too. We need to break a window and set up a chimney. Go get what you need. I'll wait here. Once the stove is set up and your wife is warm, we'll talk about our next move. Fu-Hu looked at his unconscious wife, then back at his daughter. He hesitated for a moment, but eventually, he turned around and led Qingdai downstairs. 10 minutes later, they returned. The moment they stepped inside, they froze. His wife, Zhang Wan, was still lying on the sofa, but I was standing by the living room window. I had found a bucket of black paint and a brush somewhere and was busy coating the glass. "Directorly, what are you doing?" Fu-Hu asked, bewildered. "Set up the stove first," I said without looking back. The rain didn't just infect people. It got the animals too. I ran experiments with rats back at the company. Birds are likely infected as well. Once an animal turns, it becomes incredibly aggressive toward anything living. Hiding in a house isn't enough. If we black out the windows, we lower our profile and reduce the risks. Fu-Hu looked at the piles of supplies filling the room, then at Qingdai, who had been whispering praises about me in his ear the whole time. Hearing my analysis, a flicker of genuine admiration crossed his face. He gave a quick nod and got to work. He was efficient. He rolled the sheet metal into cylinders, secured them with wire, and sealed the joints with aluminum tape. In no time, he had constructed a makeshift chimney. He broke a small section of the window, replaced it with a wooden board to fit the pipe, and finished the heating system. The windows were now pitch black, but the orange glow from the stove made the room feel strangely warm and cozy. Qingdai took a kettle into my room to chip away at the ice for water. I sat down across from Fu-Hu by the fire. We stared at the flames in silence for a long time. Finally, Fu-Hu spoke. "Directorly, those doors upstairs and downstairs. You sealed them the day the rain started, didn't you? And you shut off the main water valve." "Yeah," I replied. Will they starve to death in there? It's been 6 or 7 days. "They should be fine for now," I said. "Most people have some food at home. And there's still water in the toilet tanks if they get desperate." Fu-Hu relaxed slightly, but then his eyes narrowed. "How did you find Qingdai?" "I have a colleague whose kid goes to the same school as your daughter," I lied smoothly. "I heard things and tracked her down." "Directorly, is there really no other hope? Is the Bureau not doing anything? And you said the prophecy is about my daughter. What happens next?" His questions were starting to irritate me. I pulled out a cigarette, ready to light up, but I caught a glimpse of the unconscious Zhang Wan and shoved it back into the pack. "There is no action," I said, my voice low and frustrated. "The higher-ups are just a bunch of useless bureaucrats. The prophecy says a great disaster is coming, and that the Lord can foresee it. That's it. There's nothing else." "But my daughter is just a child." Fu-Hu's voice rose. "What could she possibly have to do with some ancient legend?" "Exactly because she's a child, we have to act now," I snapped, meeting his eyes. "We need to shoulder the burden for her ahead of time. Old Fu, stop dreaming. Even if the army eventually comes to save us, we have to save ourselves first. The two aren't mutually exclusive. I'll take all the responsibility. Qingdai is just a symbol. I won't make her do anything dangerous." Fu-Hu gave a muffled grunt of agreement and fell silent again. The atmosphere turned cold. "Old Fu," I asked, "do you have any other family?" Fu-Hu flinched. "My father," he whispered, his voice trembling. I haven't been able to get through to his phone for days. The massive, tower-like man finally broke. Tears began to stream down his face. He didn't stop until Qingdai returned with the kettle full of ice. He quickly wiped his face, trying to maintain his composure as she sat between us, looking back and forth at our somber faces. Fu-Hu took a deep breath. "Director, what do we do next?" I stared into the glowing embers of the stove. "Next, we recruit talent. We build a team. You've lived here a long time. You know everyone in this building, right? I want a list of names and backgrounds. Once I have it, I'll start letting people out." By noon, the steel frames blocking the hallway were gone. I walked out of Fu-Hu's apartment holding a handwritten list. He knew almost everyone in the unit, except for a few renters. As I scanned the names, I realized this neighborhood had a high concentration of former military and government personnel. Right now, I lacked muscle. I needed security. The resident in the apartment across from my storage room on the 4th floor caught my eye. His name was Wang Song. He was a former soldier, slightly younger than Fu-Hu, in his early 40s. A soldier meant discipline and combat skill. At his age, he should still be in decent shape. He was the perfect first candidate. I grabbed the adhesive remover, went to the 4th floor, and started spraying. After waiting 15 minutes, I pounded on Wang Song's door. Is anyone in there? Come out. There was no response. Even though people had been screaming for help downstairs for days, this apartment remained deathly silent. I pulled out my silver pistol. I had tested it last night. It held 9 rounds, and once empty, it took 30 minutes to magically reload itself. It was an incredible tool from the company. I aimed at the peephole and fired. The shot blew the entire mechanism inward, sending metal shards flying into the room. I stepped back and peered through the new hole. The floor inside was covered in a pool of blackened blood. 2 bodies lay in the center of the room, covered with white sheets. Just as I was about to look closer, I heard a faint, weak voice. Who is it? I'm your neighbor, I said. Are you hurt? I quickly moved to the side of the door, pressing my back against the wall, gun held tight in both hands. Does it matter if I'm hurt? The voice replied. Just go away. I frowned. Those 2 bodies under the sheets were likely family members who had turned and been killed. The blood looked old. The man inside was still rational, which meant he was likely safe for now, even if he feared he was infected. I turned my gun toward the door lock. The weapon was powerful and didn't ricochet. 2 shots later, the lock shattered. I pulled the door open and slid inside, moving just like I'd seen in the movies, sweeping the room with my muzzle. Wang Song, are you in there? Who are you? How do you have a gun? The voice came from the bedroom. I slowed my pace and moved toward the doorway. When I stepped inside, I let out a breath of relief. A middle-aged man was sitting on the windowsill, looking like he was about to jump. I kicked the bedroom door shut and lowered my gun. Wang Song, stay calm. Don't jump. He turned his head. He was pale, shivering violently from the cold. You have a gun. You're not a neighbor. Who are you? It doesn't matter who I am, I said firmly. Get down. Close the window. Don't give up hope yet. Let's talk. Wang Song's face was a mask of despair. Hope? What hope is there? The country is gone. The whole world is drowning in this rain. Look at the world. Is there anything left to save? As long as people are alive, there's hope. I countered, inching closer to the wall. Get down first. My family is gone, he whispered, his voice like a dying thread. You saw them. My mother, my wife, they turned into monsters. My son is in another city. He's probably gone too. He looked at me with hollow eyes. And I'm next. Just leave. Don't bother with me. I have to bother with you, I said, watching him closely. A lot of people are in your shoes. I lost people too. Don't be so pessimistic. There's still a future. Wang Song shivered and turned back toward me. He reached down and pulled up his shirt, revealing a chest wrapped in bandages. Below the bandages, his abdomen was covered in patches of mottled, gray skin. He gave me a bitter, heartbreaking smile. Look! Bang! The sound echoed through the room. Wang Song's smile froze on his face as his body tipped backward and plummeted from the window. I slumped against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. I clutched my chest, gasping for air. I had just killed someone. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. No, I told myself. It was okay. I didn't kill a man, I killed a monster. He was already at the breaking point of the transformation. I was just helping him end it before the hunger took over. I repeated these words like a mantra until my breathing slowed. I forced myself to stand up. Using a cloth to avoid direct contact, I reached out and shut the window. Then, I walked into the living room and grabbed a mop handle. I used it to flip the sheets off the 2 bodies on the floor. My throat tightened as I looked at the wounds. I poked the mop handle into the gashes, stirring the flesh. Infection from a scratch might not be 100% guaranteed, but I couldn't take that risk. Wang Song had to die. These 2 creatures had clearly put up a fight. Their clothes were shredded, and their bodies were covered in knife wounds. But the most significant injury was a deep, jagged hole in the chest. That was the killing blow. Between this and my earlier experiment with the infected rat, the pattern was clear. The heart was the weak point. I took a deep breath. I found a heavy quilt, wrapped the bodies tightly to avoid touching the blood, and dragged them to the nearest window. With a heavy kick, I sent them tumbling into the abyss. I stepped back into the hallway, the smell of copper lingering in my nose. I looked at my list again. My eyes landed on the 6th floor. That last encounter had been too close. I wasn't being cautious enough. I decided to skip the young, strong candidates for now. Two old men lived on the 6th floor. According to the files, they were former researchers with military backgrounds, but they were nearly 70. Even if they turned, they wouldn't have the physical mass to be a major threat. I headed to room 601. The resident was Sunya, an elderly man living alone. I didn't bother knocking. I stood by the door, gun drawn, waiting. "Who is it?" A voice called out from inside. "A neighbor from downstairs," I replied. My door was sealed shut. I heard noises and realized other people were trapped too. "How did you get out? Are you injured?" I raised an eyebrow. This old man was sharp. His questions were calculated. "I'm the one who sealed the doors," I said. "It's safe to open up now. I'm not hurt. What about you?" I heard the lock click. The door creaked open slowly, as if pushed by a phantom hand. I stepped forward and froze. The apartment was pitch black, save for a single, flickering candle. Behind that weak light stood a lean, weathered man. He was holding a shotgun, and the barrel was pointed straight at my chest. "Don't move," he barked. "Don't shoot," I said, slowly raising my hands. I forced my voice to stay steady. "I have no ill intent. I'm here to help. There are others in this building. I'm trying to bring everyone together so we can survive." "Survive?" Sunya let out a hollow, chilling laugh. In the candlelight, his face looked like a skull. "The country is gone. The world is beyond saving. What's the point of huddling together?" "How do you know it's beyond saving?" I countered. "The most important thing right now is to organize and fight back. If we give up now—" "Shut up," Sunya snapped. Then his voice dropped to a low, heavy whisper. "There is no coming back from this. This infection doesn't just take humans. It takes animals too. And infected creatures are driven by instinct to hunt anything living." He stared at me, his eyes dark. "Most of our major military bases are in the wilderness. There are more animals there than people. On the night the rain started, every base would have been swarmed. Small animals get inside easily. The soldiers can't fight back effectively indoors, and if they go outside, the rain gets them. The army didn't fail the cities. The army was the first thing to fall." I stood there, stunned. The file said this man used to develop medical equipment for the military. Seeing his windows boarded up and hearing his analysis, I realized he was much more than just a retired researcher. "Sir, my name is Li Haoqing," I said softly. "Can I sit down?" Sunya watched me for a long moment before slowly lowering his shotgun. He nodded. I pulled up a chair and sat across from him. "How did you know the rain affects animals?" I asked. "I spent my life in military industry," Sunya sighed, stroking the wood of his gun. "When I saw people changing, I collected some rainwater and tested it on my dog. The dog went mad. I had to put it down. I boarded up the windows because I was afraid of the birds. Yesterday, when the government announced the suspension of all services, I knew. The military is gone. But even with infections, the government shouldn't just give up," I argued. "Cities can still organize resistance." Sunya leaned forward. "There are two possibilities. First, insects. If insects can carry this, humanity is finished in weeks. The elites would only care about their own bunkers. Second, this rain is more than it seems. No natural virus jumps species and mutates this fast. This isn't biology. It's a supernatural disaster." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Then, Sunya looked up at me. "I answered your questions. Now answer mine. You locked the doors. Why?" "I believed a girl on the 5th floor," I said. "She told me the apocalypse was coming." Sunya sneered. "So you're listening to a crazy person?" Then his expression shifted. "Wait, Qingdai? I know that child. I thought she was sick, too. But how could she have known? Do you believe in nature, Mr. Sun?" I asked. "I believe in science," he said. "But I also believe nature seeks balance. If a disaster like this happens, there must be a countermeasure." "I agree," I said, leaning in. "Qingdai is that countermeasure. I'm building a team, and I need people like you. I have a test subject, an infected rat. You're an expert. You can help me run real experiments." A spark of life returned to Sunya's eyes. He looked me up and down. "A team? Why should anyone follow you?" "Because I have a profit on my side," I said firmly. "And because I'm the director of the National Key Risk Intervention Bureau." Sunya narrowed his eyes. "Bulls *****. That department doesn't exist." "It does now," I replied. Sunya stared at me, then slowly nodded. "Fine. You're right. In this world, it can exist. I'll help you. But remember this. I'm nearly 70. I've got one foot in the grave. If you want to be a leader and have me risk my life for you, you'd better show me you're worth following. If you're just another brainless waste of space, I'd rather put a bullet in my own head right now and get it over with, Sunya growled. I looked him in the eye. Then what do you want? Sunya thought for a moment. Without a word, he tossed the shotgun to me. It's a pump action. I have 30 shells left. Go downstairs and clear out the monsters in the building. Their hearts seem to be their weakness. They react to sound, light, and smell. Watch out for the stray cats and dogs in the neighborhood. They might be turning too. If you can do this, I don't care if you're a lunatic. My old life belongs to you. A cold glint flashed in my eyes as I caught the heavy weapon. That was my plan all along. Stay up here and watch. I started loading shells, but paused at the door. Old man, your neighbor across the hall is an expert too, right? I glued his door shut earlier to keep things quiet. I'm leaving you some solvent. If you're sure it's safe, let him out. If not, wait for me to get back. It's freezing in here. Go to Fu Qingdai's place and wait for me there. Sunya nodded, his expression unreadable. I reached for the handle, then stopped, turning back with an awkward smile. How do you actually work this thing? Sunya let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. And here I thought you were a pro. Just get back alive, and I'll teach you. 40 minutes later, I stood in the first-floor hallway. I had layered up, wearing a makeshift anti-zombie suit I'd sewn together myself under my down jacket. I had thick gloves on and a motorcycle helmet protecting my head. My silver handgun and the shotgun were both tethered to my waist with ropes. I couldn't afford to drop them if I got nervous. A machete was tucked into my belt for good measure. I stood in the shadows, regulating my breathing until my heart stopped hammering against my ribs. Then, I kicked the building door open with a resounding crash. The noise echoed through the frozen air. Outside, the monsters had been standing still, thin layers of ice coating their bodies from the freezing temperatures. At the sound, the ice shells shattered. They stumbled toward me, a dozen of them closing in on the entrance. Suddenly, a series of firecrackers exploded in the distance. The zombies instantly pivoted, drawn away by the sharper noise. At the same time, I heard a rhythmic clanging on the metal stair railing inside. Clang, clang, clang. I didn't hesitate. I threw the door wide. A dozen zombies had their backs to me. Bang, bang, bang. I fired 9 times in rapid succession. As soon as the magazine was empty, I slammed the door shut and retreated into the stairwell, my breath coming out in white clouds. I sprinted back up to the 5th floor. Fu Qingdai was standing at the landing, a wrench in one hand and a pack of firecrackers in the other. Her face was lit up with excitement. It worked. It worked. I think you got 3 of them, maybe more. I reached out and ruffled her hair, feeling a wave of relief. You did great. We repeated the process several times, lures and ambushes, until the courtyard fell silent. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the immediate area was clear. Back inside, Zhangwan had finally woken up, though she looked pale and exhausted. Sunya was there, along with another gaunt, elderly man. We huddled around a stove, where a pot of sauerkraut, lard, and sliced ham simmered. The rich, fatty aroma filled the room, making my stomach growl. Shaoli, let me introduce you, Sunya said, gesturing to the man beside him. This is Wei Da. Call him Old Wei. We were colleagues back in the day. Old Wei, this is the kid I told you about. Wei Da looked up and managed a strained, weak smile. I reached out to shake his hand. Sunya sighed softly. Old Wei, you know your wife's heart couldn't take much more. Her passing now, maybe it saved her from even greater suffering. You have to keep going. Not just for yourself, but for the young ones. We're old bones, but we can still be useful. Besides, Shaoli basically saved both our lives today. Wei Da nodded silently, wiping the corner of his eye. As Zhangwan went to get bowls and chopsticks, I turned to Sunya. So, old man, does this mean you're in? Sunya waved a hand dismissively. You've got guts and a brain, even if you seem a bit touched in the head. I don't exactly have other options. But I don't get one thing. Why leave 1 or 2 of them alive down there? How much ammo do you have left for that pistol? Plenty, I said. But the shotgun is for emergencies. I want to save the shells. As for the 2 I left behind, I need them for target practice. Sunya went quiet, thinking. You've got bows, arrows, and plenty of bullets. You're better prepared than anyone I've ever seen. But don't get cocky. Did you notice the bodies today? Their eyes and ears were sealed with ice, yet they reacted instantly. Their movement speed is already close to a normal person's walking pace. I frowned. You mean when the temperature rises and the ice melts, they'll get faster? Sharp observation, Sunya said. But it's more than that. At these temperatures, after being soaked in rain, their internal fluids should be frozen solid. They should be blocks of meat, physically incapable of movement. The fact that they can move at all defies every law of science I know. He paused, his gaze turning serious. Tomorrow, I want you to bring me 2 of them. I need to cut them open and see what's happening inside. It's risky. Are you up for it? I hesitated. I was prepared to fight them, but dissecting them was different. The risk of infection from splashing fluids was massive. Are you sure you can find anything? I'm not sure of anything, Sunya admitted. This is outside our existing knowledge. I know medicine, but I'm no world-class pathologist. All I can say is that we need to understand the threat. It's a huge risk, but if we don't take it now, the price we pay later will be much higher. I understand, I said. I'll drag 2 bodies in tomorrow. I'll do the heavy lifting, you do the observing. Also, I have a cage of infected rats. We can start those experiments at the same time. Sunya nodded. I have half a bottle of rainwater I collected earlier. That should be enough to start. The rainwater is probably useless now, I said calmly. Sunya's eyes sharpened. What do you mean? How could you know that? I can see the source of the infection, I explained, as the others stared at me in shock. It dissipates if it sits for about 5 days without a host. You have an ability like that? Sunya breathed. What does it look like? I gave a bitter laugh. Call it a talent. Like Qingdai's visions. It looks like a gray mist. Without water, it turns into a gas and drifts away. I can only see it in its raw state, though. Once it infects a living creature, I can't track it anymore. Sunya looked genuinely hopeful for the first time. 5 days and it vanishes? If the rain has stopped, does that mean the source of the pollution will be gone soon? Wada, who had been silent until now, spoke up in a weary, hollow voice. Only if there isn't a second rain. We didn't know enough yet. The source of the infection had already shifted from the rain to living creatures. I looked at the others and gestured toward the window. Those walking dead out there showed no signs of dying off. My words cast a heavy shadow over the room. I gave a helpless smile and told them to stop holding on to illusions. We could only rely on ourselves now. It was time to prepare for a fight. We ate in silence. Night fell, and the wind outside began to die down. The house was deathly quiet. I could hear the distinct hiss of the honeycomb coal burning in the stove. Faint glimmers of orange light leaked through the cracks of the furnace, adding a touch of warmth to the pitch-black room. Fu-hoo, Sunya, and the others found their spots. They wrapped themselves tightly in quilts and drifted off to sleep. I curled up in the corner, unable to rest. I stared at the firelight and let my mind wander. I had killed quite a few monsters today. Strangely, I didn't feel much guilt. Deep down, I felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction, a thrill that came from vengeance. But I wondered if I could handle the dissections. Sunya needed to run experiments because we still didn't fully understand the nature of this infection. I debated whether to wait for his results before recruiting more people or just start immediately. As I was thinking, a small dark shadow scurried past the stove. It moved low to the ground and then pounced lightly, landing right next to me. It was Qingdai. I looked down at her. She peeked out from her quilt, showing only her small face. She asked if she could sleep next to me. I reached out and patted her head. My hand came away feeling slick with grease. I immediately wiped the oil off on her blanket. I asked her what was wrong. She whispered that her mother's condition still wasn't good. Her voice trembled, thick with the sound of unshed tears. She asked me what she should do. I looked up at the ceiling and let out a long sigh. She was still just a kid. She had helped me kill zombies and held it together until now. That was already an incredible feat. I told her it would be okay. I promised her that her mother just needed time to recover. I told her things would get safer and that one day, we would live a normal life again. Qingdai didn't say a word. She just cried silently. Seeing her like that, I reached out and pulled her closer. My hand made a wet, squelching sound against her hair. I couldn't help it. I joked that the oil on her head was thick enough to stir-fry a whole dish. I told her that with her around, at least we wouldn't starve. Her face turned bright red instantly. She let out a muffled groan and pulled the quilt over her head, burying herself like a ball into my chest.